the president, Robin Stone. The time is now 6:06 p.m. and I call the meeting to order. Before we proceed further, I would like to ask Commission Secretary Marisa Davis to briefly explain some procedures for participating in today's meeting.
Can you hear me? Okay. The meetings of this minute will reflect that this meeting is being held in person at City Hall, room 408, 1 Dr. Carlton B. Goodlit Place, San Francisco, California, and is also being broadcast remotely via WebEx. As authorized by the Elections Commission's February 15th, 2023 vote, members of the public may attend the meeting to observe and provide public comment either at the physical meeting location or remotely. Details and instructions for participating remotely are listed on the Commission's website and on today's meeting agenda. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak, 6 minutes if you are on the line with an interpreter. When providing public comment, you are encouraged to state your name clearly. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and you will be muted. Please address all your comments to the entire commission and not to a specific commissioner. While providing public comment remotely, please ensure that you are in a quiet place. When joining by phone, you will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will be automatically muted and in listening mode only. To make a public comment, dial *3 to raise your hand, and when your item of interest comes up, you will be added to the public comment line. You will hear, "You have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you." The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. If at any time you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from the public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say, "You have lowered your hand." When joining by WebEx or a web browser, make sure that the participant side panel is showing by clicking on the participant's icon. At the bottom of the list of attendees is a small button or icon that looks like a hand. Press the hand icon to raise your hand. You will be unmuted when it's your time to comment. When you are done with your comment, click the hand icon again to lower your hand. In addition to participating in real time, interested persons are encouraged to participate in this meeting by submitting public comment in writing by 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting to elections.commission@sfgov.org. It will be shared with the commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included in part of the official meeting file. Thank you, President Stone.
Thank you. Secretary Davis, would you please proceed with item 1, commission roll call?
Yes. President Stone.
Present.
Vice President Jordanic.
Here.
Commissioner Bernholz.
Here.
Commissioner Dye.
Here.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Here.
Commissioner Lavolsi.
Here.
Commissioner Parker.
Here.
President Stone, with 7 members present and accounted for, you have your quorum.
Excellent. And I will hand it to Commissioner Dye to recite the Elections Commission Land Acknowledgement Resolution as adopted from October 19th, 2022.
The San Francisco Elections Commission acknowledges that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors and relatives of the Ramaytush community and affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. That closes out agenda item number 1. We will now move to agenda item number 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Election Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda. And we will start with in-person public commenters. Secretary Davis, will you use the timer for the public commenters? And Secretary Davis will let you know when your time has begun.
Testing.
Now we can hear you.
Can we go back to 3? I just blew 10 seconds. Can we go back to 3 minutes? Thank you for that. Good evening, Commissioners. Alan Buradell. Since Prop E formed this Elections Commission, the reputation of our Department of Elections has steadily grown over these past 20 years. And as we all likely know, it started at a very low point 20 years ago, which is what made Prop E and the formation of this commission necessary. But as has been noted by many people here, several of you, this commission now finds itself embroiled in controversies that are eroding the trust that prior civil servants like you all had carefully built, controversies that prior commissioners had successfully avoided. The first was to bring your redistricting task force appointees before this commission on Friday, April 8th last year. Bringing them before you was certainly your right. It was your right to do so, and because they serve at your pleasure, but doing so 4 days before the map was due and under the political pressure of local and state political organizations was an outrageous breach of trust the elections department had slowly earned. They had slowly earned trust over the past 20 years. This commission stepped up to the brink of a disaster, but then wisely stepped away at the last minute and decided not to go through with Commissioner Dyer's desired termination of these appointees. Then second came the controversy around the reappointment of our nationally recognized and highly regarded head of our Department of Elections, John Arnst. Once again, Commissioner Dye walked us all to the brink of a catastrophe, but this commission again wisely stepped away at the last minute and decided not to go through with Commissioner Dye's desired plan to perform a national search for a new director to replace Director Arnst. And now we find ourselves on the brink for a third time. This Elections Commission is again being brought to the brink. And once again, you're being brought to the brink by none other than Commissioner Dye. Commissioner Dye will soon be asking you to recommend a highly political redistricting reform proposal that will require our Board of Supervisors to place a charter amendment on the ballot. As you've done twice before, Commissioners, you can wisely step away from the brink for a third time. I've watched as most of you have struggled with Commissioner Dye's agenda. On April 6th last year, I watched Commissioner Bernholtz vigorously nod her head as one of her fellow commissioners expressed concern about the commission substituting its judgment for the judgment of the redistricting task force. Commissioner Crowley has repeatedly said she feels this kind of advocacy belongs at the Board of Supervisors and not here. And in February, Commissioner Stone struggled to understand why more time was needed to continue pushing redistricting reform here at this commission. And finally, Commissioner Jordanek.
Thank you.
Oh, continuing on those comments, AB 1248 is an ill-conceived.
Sorry to interrupt, but let's just make sure we have the timer set. So you have 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Sure.
Continuing on those comments, AB 1248 is an ill-conceived knee-jerk reaction to the debacle LA City faced this last cycle when council members were secretly recorded drawing their own safe districts. AB 1248 is a blunt instrument that can lead to all kinds of unintended consequences. LA needs reform, but AB 1248 creates an expensive, corruptible bureaucratic mess. Why a blunt instrument? Because most other jurisdictions in the state are not remotely similar to that of LA. LA has an advisory redistricting commission where each member is directly appointed by each council member. LA City Mayor appoints 2 commissioners. Those appointed advisors are not included in the final map drawing, and the maps are finalized behind closed doors amongst the council members themselves, who then draw safe districts. This process is totally different from what we do here in San Francisco, despite the accusations that it was similar during fierce committee meetings. San Francisco County is among the earliest adopters of a truly independent redistricting commission, and we call it our redistricting task force. Our board of supervisors, our mayor, and our elections commission each appoint 3 members to a 9-member redistricting task force. Our process has worked well for 3 census cycles, despite significant and highly publicized interference from a number of special interest groups, professional political organizations, and our own election commission during the most recent cycle. Yet this blunt instrument called AB 1248 sweeps even San Francisco into it. Diverse appointing authorities are good for San Francisco. AB 1248 will take San Francisco backwards, not forward. Why? Let's look at San Francisco's 3 appointing authorities. 1, the mayor. There is no chance of incumbency protection to be provided by these 3 appointees because the mayor is elected at large. 2, Board of Supervisors. There is no chance of incumbency protection to be provided by these 3 appointees because they are voted on and approved by all 11 supervisors and only represent 1/3 of the task force. 3, Elections Commission. There is no chance of incumbency protection to be provided by these 3 appointees because they are voted on and approved by 7 appointed commissioners and also only represent 1/3 of the task force. I participated in the last redistricting, and I can tell you it was a robust process, and it was the most robust in California's history. So I think we're doing it right now. Stephanie Lehman will complete a review of AB 1248.
Yeah. Marie Harabiel.
Hurabiell. Sure, thank you very much.
Marisa, do you mind also moving the screen of attendees over to the side so I can see commissioners? You can just slide it over. Oh, works. Thank you.
Ready?
Okay, thank you, everyone.
So 6 of our redistricting task force members come from 2 appointing bodies that are directly accountable to voters. And as Marie stated a moment ago, they are the mayor and board of supervisors. This is a hybrid of diverse appointing authorities that has a track record of serving San Francisco well. And this last redistricting cycle saw the most diverse appointees to our redistricting task force in our history. Again, the redistricting in San Francisco did not fail. In fact, it was extremely successful in spite of the healthy adversity it encountered from the public, the outrageous interference it faced from this commission, a few members of the Board of Supervisors, and the League of Women's Voters, Asia Law Caucus, and other political lobbying groups that didn't like that it couldn't control the process or the outcome. The most troublesome provision of AB 1248 is the one that places the power of appointments solely in the hands of the unelected. It prohibits the use of political bodies as appointing authorities to any independent redistricting commission. A panel of retired judges, the Ethics Commission, senior staff at the Ethics Commission, and the Election Commission have all been suggested as good alternatives that will comply with AB 1248 and qualify as non-political. But this restriction of appointments by political bodies is born out of the false notion that we can remove political influence from the fundamentally political redistricting process. We need to acknowledge that we are all political, and that includes those of us who are retired judges, ethics commissioners, elections commissioners, and anyone that they may appoint. It is far better to have appointments made by bodies that are directly accountable to the voters and still have no ability to protect incumbency by drawing safe districts. I also just would like to say thank you to all of the commissioners who were actually looking up and paying attention. Thank you.
Just one moment.
Pardon? Sure. My name is Chelsea Waite. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to reemphasize a few of the points we just heard. First, about why AB 1248 is bad for San Francisco, and then why this commission must again step back from the brink they've been pushed to. AB 1248 is a blunt instrument designed to address problems in LA City that we don't have here in San Francisco. AB 1248 will turn redistricting into an expensive, cumbersome, bureaucratic mess run by insiders not directly accountable to the voters. State and local political groups, as well as the Elections Commission, interfered with our most recent redistricting task force. Why did you elections commissioners stand behind groups who decided not to participate in the work the task force was sworn in to complete? These groups started drawing their own maps based on unknown information, and during meetings we have no record of. Then they presented these maps with demands the task force adopt them. And you all then drag your appointees into a commission meeting 4 days before the deadline to tell them they're not listening to these people who didn't participate with the redistricting task force in the first place. That feels outrageous. And now AB 1248 calls for a non-political body like this Elections Commission to be the vetting and selection authority for an independent redistricting commission here in San Francisco. Well, ironically, the only non-political appointing body to our own most recent redistricting commission was the only body out of the three to so grossly interfere with our redistricting process. Did the mayor's office pull their task force members into room 200 to tell them they'd be terminated 4 days before the map deadline? How about the Board of Supervisors? Did they call their appointees into the legislative chamber to berate them about not listening to the community? No. The only body to do that was this supposed non-political body, the type AB 1248 thinks is perfect for vetting and selecting future independent redistricting task force members. Bodies that act recklessly, like this Elections Commission, are those that are not accountable to the voters. This is why they should be kept far away from our redistricting task force. Commissioners, I urge you to step away from the brink here and make no recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to put a charter amendment on next year's ballot reform regarding redistricting. I yield my time.
Fine. Thank you. We'll move to online public comment.
Hi, this is Lauren Gervardin with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. Thought the redistricting item was later, but I'm hearing public comment about it now, so thought we'd chime in just to thank you for having the redistricting conversation and for doing such thoughtful inquiry into what reforms are needed in San Francisco. San Francisco's redistricting body is not truly independent because elected officials appoint some of the members. And we do have a wonderful opportunity to create truly independent redistricting to benefit all of San Francisco's residents and diverse communities. AB 1248 is based on best practices in redistricting statewide that have at times surpassed what San Francisco has done. It's been a really long time since San Francisco updated the way that we do redistricting, and the time for reform is now. AB 1248 is a set of carefully thought out reforms that are designed to put redistricting back in the hands of communities. We hope Governor Newsom will sign both AB 1248 and AB 764. And we look forward to seeing progress on other much needed redistricting reforms here in San Francisco and the Elections Commission's conversations about that reform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Davis. That will close out general public comment, and just a quick note about agenda item number 6, as a handful of comments were made about redistricting. Agenda item number 6 will focus on the contents of the redistricting committee's conversations and previous meetings and suggestions, updates that come out of that. So just to clarify the difference between what was enabled or allowed in general public comment versus what will be open to public comment on agenda item number 6. So let's close out 2 and move to agenda item number 3, approval of previous meeting minutes, discussion and possible action on previous Elections Commission meeting minutes, specifically on July 19th, 2023. And just as a reminder to commissioners, if you would like to make comment, you may do so using the monitor in front of you. I will open it up. Does anyone have any? Okay, so do I generally have unanimous consent that we can approve the meeting minutes? Love it. Love to hear that. Okay, so let's close out agenda item number 3. Excuse me, let's take public comment first on agenda item number 3 before we close it out.
Colin, you have your hand raised. Is that from our previous topic? Caller, you have your hand raised. Is that from
now
the
lowered.
previous topic?
It's now been
It's
lowered,
not raised.
so we can mute. We can put it back on mute. You want to put them back on mute? Yeah. Great. Thank you, Secretary Davis. Okay, now we can officially close out agenda item number 3 and move to agenda item number 4, the Director's Report. Discussion and possible action regarding the Director's Report for September 2023. I will hand it over to the Director, John Arntz. Raise my hand.
Thank you, President Stone. Thanks, Lisa.
Yes.
I can take questions on the report, but I will say that the March elections already started for the department. The signature in lieu of filing fee period began last week, and the end of this month will be the beginning of the nomination period. Most of the contests are state and federal for March. However, since this is the presidential primary election, the ballot will include the Central Committee and County Council seats, which will be a lot of people. And so we'll be receiving a lot of nominations starting at the end of this month. And then also, we've already started to work on, let's say, the poll worker guide, the voter information pamphlet. We've already started considering the envelopes for the vote by mail ballots, and then also the ballots themselves. So for us, the cycle has already begun. So even though it might seem far away, it's already happening, and it'll continue to increase as we go forward. We're getting our staffing plans put together with the managers as we go into the cycle in relation to our budget, because our budget's a bit tighter for staffing this cycle than it was for 2022. And then also we're preparing our processes around an expected decrease in our budget for staffing for 2024. So we're trying to think through our processes where we can be better, also reduce overtime for this election, but also in anticipation of the 2025 budget, which we expect probably to be less funded than we are even for March, just because of the city's financial situation.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind pulling the microphone a little bit
Sorry,
closer?
mask. Is it better?
That's much
Okay,
better.
sorry.
Thank you. No
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
No problem.
Usually I'm too loud. I get this message.
No, you're not. You're
So-
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's my hard.
And then also the Chromebooks have been ordered. I'm not done yet. We had some challenges, and I thought I'd be coming here and saying we weren't going to move forward yet. But we actually have got things resolved and the orders in, and now we're waiting for the shipment to occur. So I just want to make that known. And from there, I can take any questions from the commissioners on the report.
Thank you, Director Arntz, and thanks for moving that closer. As mentioned, please use the monitor in front of you to raise hands, and I'll call on commissioners in that order. So I will open it up to commissioners. Commissioner Parker.
Thank you as always. I have to say there's a certain level of excitement I have whenever the election season really starts. So I'm not surprised at all about all of the updates on the work having already started. I had a couple of thoughts or questions. One was really appreciated the efforts that you all have around the voter registration day. It seems super full and inclusive and working across the city. And especially, as you know, I'm excited all the work with young people that's listed here. Love the book list partnership that you talked about that will be shared with families to talk about with children. And as you have all of these events, I think generally, I guess my comment was this kind of effort, I think, is important regardless of how many people actually show up, just to have it available, which I would assume you agree with and probably many of us agree with. And I'm wondering if you all have a way that you measure success when you're choosing partners, choosing venues, events, and things that you are working with. Is there some way that you all talk about it within the department about, like, this was a successful one, we'll do it again, acknowledging that just showing up is also important? So that's one question. I can wait and have you respond, or I can just make my other comments.
Go ahead. However you want.
Well, I'll let you do this one, and then the other ones are really fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of answered the question in the latter part of your question. Is we go wherever we can to do outreach, and so even if our personnel can't match the number of events, then yeah, we certainly will consider where we can reach more people. But really, wherever we're invited to go and whatever's happening in the city, then we'll certainly make our presence known. And then we actually encourage people on our website and also in the information that we put out to let us know if you want us to come, if you want us to be present. And we don't measure the number of people that are going to be there and whether we're going to be there or not. Just a matter of the invitation, and if we can provide information and have exposure on the election. So no, we don't try to limit it. And if we were to have a higher number of requests than we anticipated, then we would. Well, and what we've been doing now actually is we would have people from outside the outreach group be involved in the events and be involved in the outreach. So. Well, on Tuesday, when we had all these multiple events, we had people from nearly all the divisions in the department going out and doing outreach. And so we don't try to limit our outreach. We don't try to limit the number of events or opportunities based on just our outreach personnel or just based on the number of people that might show up. We try to get our folks out there so we can match the requests. As far as success, we try to anticipate the types of information that people will need during the election cycle. And then if that information can be delivered in a way that is useful to them. In different groups different situations would require different approaches. A tabling event at a street fair would be different than going to the jails and doing outreach to the inmates. And then even like going to the juvenile center in relation to the jails is different because the environment's different, and the access that the people have to our folks is more flexible. It's more free than in the juvenile hall than it is at the jail. So, and like right now, the primary message that we're getting out is the primary election and the fact that what people see in their ballot is determined by what party affiliation they have when they register to vote. And that's really the primary. From our experience, that's the main bit of information to get out to people, in addition to registering to vote, updating registration, and then if there's any questions, generally on the elections process. But right now, we're just trying to get, for us, trying to get people to realize that how they registered affects how they can vote, and then what their options are now and up through election day, and regarding what they receive on their ballot. But we get feedback too, and when we go out to the events, when we do the tablings, and we always provide surveys to people, and they can complete a form, they can tell us verbally. It's not a matter of having to fill out something, and then we bring that information back and review it, and we try to get a sense of the questions people have. If they have questions that we're not providing information on, if they have questions for which we don't have materials, then then in a sense we're not successful. So we'd make adjustments. So to answer the first question, we try to hit everything. Then the answer is how we're successful. It's a matter of of what type of election, where we are in the cycle, and then what kind of feedback we're getting from the public as we're out there.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll just combine both of these because one is just a comment. I just want to say I really love the outreach calendar. Thanks
Yeah.
for providing that. That was awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the last is just a small question. And you may have said this before, and maybe I'm just not remembering, but would you remind us how youth ambassadors are selected? And just generally wondering what kind of feedback you all receive about the program.
Well, they self-select themselves, really. So we
Please
get,
sign up.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we get the information out. We go through the youth commission. We work with them, and then we get the information out to the schools, and then we try to work with the schools to allow us to get the information out to the classrooms. But the students essentially sign up to be the ambassador. There's no winnowing process. If someone wants to be an ambassador, they can be an ambassador. And what was your other part of the question?
Oh, well, that was the only, well, I guess the other part of my question was what kind of feedback have you generally received about the program from people who've participated in it?
Really good. The students have really liked the program because it's not a matter of them just passing out registration cards at the schools. We bring them into the department. We give them an orientation. We give them a tour. We explain the process to them in the department. And then also we don't dictate to them the type of outreach they'll do to their peers. We encourage, we almost kind of require them to create their own outreach plan and methods. We don't say, well, don't do that, because we don't know what they might think of and how to reach their peers, and we pull ideas from them based on their activities. But we do review their plans, so we do provide comments, and then also when the students are doing any kind of activity at the schools, we tend to be present so that we're there as a resource, if nothing else, because the students certainly can learn the registration process. They can have provide a general overview on the elections process itself, but there's more specific questions that they probably couldn't answer. And so we'll be on hand to answer those questions and also provide feedback. At the end, the students provide an assessment of what they thought of their experience, and then we pull from that as far as developing the program going forward. So it's been a good experience, I think, for everyone involved, including the department. But certainly, the students have had a positive reaction to the program. So
That's great. Thank you. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. It sounds like a partnership with you
Yeah.
as they come up with these plans, which is super important, I think, to get them really involved, right? And really bought in to the process. So thank you.
yeah. Yeah, and I will say too, the ambassadors usually are more successful than we would be if we were to go to a school and try
Absolutely.
to, so.
Peers, right?
You're right, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Parker. Vice President Jordanek.
Okay. Thank you, President Stone. Director Ernst, thanks for your report. I just had two questions. The first is there a way that people could see the lists of books, the two lists of books?
Yes, I think it's on the library's website. I can send the link. I can send you the link. I can't tell you where to find their site as I sit here. But.
Okay, great. I looked very quickly at the main public library's website. I didn't see it on the top banner, but maybe it's because that was yesterday, but I'm not sure. And then the second question is, thanks for the update on the I voted sticker. You've had a tremendous response to that, over 200 submissions. Have you thought about how you're going to what voting method you're going to use to choose among the 9?
So it's not going to be a voting method. We're going to use SurveyMonkey.
Oh, survey. Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, people are going to respond to a survey.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll take that information for deciding which sticker we'll be using for March.
And that's after they whittle it down to the 9. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek. Any other commissioner? Anyone else? I don't see any hands raised. I will jump in with some of my comments then, but if commissioners want to add thoughts, please just raise hands using the monitor. So few things that have kind of already been touched on. I was going to mention the high school ambassadors program. I specifically like the element of training about outreach plans. I think that's so effective. You're giving young people really important tools and like general skills, but also an element of empowerment in civic participation. So I just wanted to give kudos to that. I also am very excited about how many people are participating in the I Voted sticker contest. I cannot tell you how many people have reached out to me about how excited they are that this is happening. And I want to give a lot of kudos as well to the member of the public who came to the Elections Commission and really wanted to see us talk about this. And the director and the department have really made it happen. So I just think that's really amazing. And I'm really, really proud of that. I'm proud of this body for participating in that conversation as well. And one question I wanted to ask specifically about I Voted is that the October 10th to October 17th is 1 week. And so, are there ways the commission can help bolster participation in the voting process? I love the question about how voting, like the system of voting, that's awesome. But if there are ways that we can help, bolster people to participate in that actual time period once voting has commenced, let us know. I think that would be great. We can all do as much as we can to promote it. So you could answer that now or later. And then there were 3 other things I wanted to mention, which you had one of them you had kind of brought up, but I didn't fully hear you. So around poll worker recruitment, I know in the past, sometimes that has, at the beginning stages, been a little bit slower. And you had mentioned something about cost cutting around with the budget. Can you just repeat what you said around recruitment? And if you have any concerns about recruitment, and if there are ways that we can help bolster that as well, that would be great.
So my comments on staffing didn't relate to poll workers. It was specifically on department personnel. The temporary as needed personnel that we would bring into the department for the election. For poll worker recruitment, primary elections tend to be more challenging than general elections anyway, although we're a bit helped in this situation because it's a presidential primary election. When it comes to helping or securing poll workers, certainly commissioners, any groups you belong to, any organizations, any newsletters you add content to, any email groups you belong to, any events you attend, please direct people to our website or have them call the department, or if the commission could even do something more formally potentially. But yeah, certainly especially for November, I don't expect there to be a shortage of people want to work at the polls. But for March, yeah, certainly whatever you guys think you can do to get the word out and have people contact us, poll workers, would be wonderful.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing that. And if we just keep us posted on for the primaries, how it's going in terms of pacing with recruitment, that would be great. One question I had about Go Green is what is the end date of when that program will, I assume it will run up until very close to the election, but is there a timeline end date? And if so, is there a plan to also calculate the actual cost savings of not printing those specific voter information pamphlets?
We will. We haven't thought about that yet. We'll run this through up until the November election, actually, and even if we can, we'll do it afterwards. But we're not going to just run it up to March and stop. We're going to run it through. Say that again. We're not going to run the Go Green initiative to March and stop. We're going to run it through the November election because a lot of times the Go Green. This is not the first time that we've done something like this. We try to get people to move off the paper book. It's when people start receiving the books is when they want to go green. So it's not prior to the election. It's when the election's happening. So we won't stop during the election cycle. Actually.
Cool.
Probably the best time to get people.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for clarifying. And then the other question I wanted to mention, or the comment/question, is around non-citizen voting, because I think I was very excited to see the progress that the city had made in terms of ensuring that we can incorporate non-citizen voters in local school board elections. And I know that you had included at the end of your report that the department plans to notify former non-citizen voters about the case and to provide information on how to register to vote. And I imagine that there will be a lot of sensitivity and elements of trust that will be required in that process, understanding that there is a lot of mistrust generally when folks who are non-citizens are trying to participate in local governmental policies. So I would love to know how the department is thinking about that, maybe in our next regular meeting, just community groups that might be where there could be some outreach and who are working with folks who are non-citizens and talking about elections, if you would be open to it, knowing that I think when we had talked about this last year, there was because it came up so close to the election, there was very, very low participation. And so would be great to talk about how to get that up a little bit so that people can feel like they can trust the election process. More just a comment about that.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Look forward to hearing more.
And also, that's something the commission can contribute to as well.
Great.
You know, I mean, you guys understand what the department is doing, but we don't know what you guys do when you leave this room. But if there's organizations that you belong to, if you go to meetings, if there's people that you speak to, certainly, reaching out to people who are non-citizens who are eligible to vote, I think every avenue is useful. So I would encourage the commissioners actually to consider how they can also help get the word out.
That's great to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. The more confidence we can build in the constituency around elections, I think is good. So thank you. I still don't see any other hands from commissioners. That's the end of my comments. Oh, actually, I did want to mention, I too would love to see the list, the book list. I thought that was awesome. And I would love to even have that list on the department's or the commission's website. I was so excited by that. So great idea. Thank you. Any other commissioners want to make comment? Wow, easy breezy today. Let's move to public comment then. Right along. Thank you, Director Arntz. That closes out agenda item number 4. We're now going to move to agenda item number 5, Commissioners' Reports. Discussion and possible action on Commissioners' Reports for topics not covered by another item on this agenda. Meetings with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long-range planning for commission activities in areas of study, proposed legislation which affect elections, others. Vice President Jordanek.
Yeah, thank you, President Stone. So I wanted to share with the commission something I made since the last meeting. And it's a proof of concept of a ranked choice voting results reporter that's also open source. And I also shared this with Director Arntz a month or so ago. And it's because it's open source, it's something that the department could use as an example, or it could use it as is or as a starting point to improve its results page. And the main reason I did this was I want to reduce the technical barriers as much as possible for the department to improve its results reporting. And there's also an associated memo I wrote, which is part of the agenda packet. But President Stone, if I was wondering if I could spend a few minutes just to walk the commission through. I was going to share my screen. Okay, so
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you. So let's see if this works here. We did test this out in advance. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now, so I think we're going to want to make this bigger on the console.
Yes, that's my fault. Perfect. Excellent.
So I'm hoping that the public can see this, but I'm starting out here showing the summary page for the November 2022 election, which is the department. I'm just going to quickly show you what the ranked choice voting part looks like. So here you could see that for the ranked choice voting on the summary page, we see the first choice percentages here along with the first choice vote totals. And then if you were to click on this link here, it would take you to a PDF of the full results. And this is a PDF that's generated by the Dominion voting system that it's in English only, and it's not accessible to people with vision impairments, since the PDF doesn't really work well with the screen readers. So I wanted to show a way that we could implement an improved display for ranked choice voting. So I wrote an open source software project. I got most of it working in a couple weeks, and I spent a couple more weeks kind of refining it and improving it. And it has a description on the project page. So I did make a demo of what this project would look like for the past RCV contest the department has had since 2019. And I'm going to show you that here. And there's sort of two parts to it. The first is the summaries that it generates. And these are like HTML tables that the department could, if it wanted to, include on that summary page I just showed you. And it uses the same styling that the department currently uses. And here, this format's kind of interesting. It's something that the Center for Civic Design recommended in one of its best practices documents from May 2023. It's a 2-column format that is very good for a compact display. The summary page, we want to be able to have a lot of information. So in this contest, you could see it has round 1, and then the final round is on the right with the winner highlighted in green. And like the rest of the summary page, I made it so it's multilingual like the departments. So if we click on Chinese at the top, we can see it translates part of the table. And I don't have all of the translations, so I just did the ones that I had access to. And then if you're to click on one of these links to the details, it would give you the full round by round results of that contest. And again, and this is because it's HTML, it's accessible to, more accessible than PDF. It can be used with screen readers and things. And we could add, maybe, so if you hover over one of the terms, it would give you like an explanation of what exhausted votes means or something. And then similarly, if you click at the top, like Chinese, it would make the results accessible to people that speak other languages. And then this round by round table here, I kind of modeled after the round by round tables that the department used to have back before 2019. I'll just show you what one of those looks like. This is the table that our voting system generated before 2019, but when the department got its new Dominion voting system, it stopped supporting the HTML format. So I just basically took what the department used to do, and then I kind of improved the color scheme a little bit and made it in order. So, and then the memo I wrote has more, it just kind of has more information about how it works, and then, just different background. So that's what I wanted to show the commission.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek. Did you want to make additional comments before I open it for other folks?
I did have one question for Director Arntz, but I guess I'll just ask now. Yeah, Director Arntz, one of the questions I had for you by email was if the department has access to translations of the terms that appear on the Dominion PDF, the round by round report, does the department have translations of those words into other languages?
I haven't checked. I don't know if we have translations for everything, but we would have to make translations, when we did this. And I will say too, this is not a current project of the department. We haven't put time into it ourselves. We did look at the code, And then our IT guys had commended you for your code. They thought it was very good. But we probably have to make some changes, but we just haven't had time to really delve into it because we have other tools that we have to get on our website now and before March especially. But yeah, whatever, since this is more malleable than what we can pull from the system now, then we'd have more latitude to, add text, make translations and things like that. So.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm happy to make improvements myself if you wanted to, or your staff could do it. And then, so thank you. And then one more comment to the commission, that the numbers for these reports are pulled from the Dominion's export files, like the Dominion exports an XML file and a Excel file, so it can read in those files. So thanks.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions or comments they want to make for around this, or specifically to Vice President Jordanek? Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Vice President Jordanek for doing this. I think this is fabulous. This is something that we have continued to struggle with, how to present these results in an accessible way for the public. And we made huge improvements last time just by making it a single click so that people could go and see the final accurate tally. But that was a good find, the Center of Civic Design, did you say? Yeah, I think it's very easy to understand. Here's the first round total and here's the final. And it's a simple, easy to comprehend format. I think that will really assist the public and the media in understanding who won, which is the most fundamental question that people have when they go to the website. I can't find the speak thing on my.
Oh, well, I see your hand. I'll help you with that. Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
I really love this. I'm a RCV kind of junkie. I'm an RCV. I've watched it since day one, and I tell you, age is creeping up on me. I have a lot of, I'm fortunate to have a lot of people that I still, that still live in San Francisco that I grew up with that are of my vintage, and they do not understand ranked choice voting. And so, and I think part of it is the way that it's displayed. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to explain it to friends and people that are really intelligent people with big jobs, and they don't get it. They don't take the time. So the thing that I just want to call out is when you said these exhausted and overvotes, that you could actually cover over that and have a definition. That is brilliant, because half the time when I'm looking at it, I'm like, what the heck does that mean? You know, I've been told 100 times what it means, but if I'm a person who looks at every election, and I do, and you know, interestingly, election night, I have like 10 people of my vintage texting me, asking me who's in the lead. So what does that tell you? We definitely need this. And I'm excited, Chris, with all the work that you've done, and also that we have an opportunity maybe to test an open source program. I wonder, and I know that it's up to Director Arntz and his department, if there's a way to test it with one particular race. That might be a way to go if we're concerned about jumping in. I don't know how that works. I just want to play devil's advocate here and try to anticipate all the potential obstacles that could come, but I do really think it would be worth its while. And it would be great too if you did something like this and alerted the media to the fact that you were doing it and getting their feedback on it when it occurred. Because I just, the continuing ballots, I mean, what is that, nobody understands it. So kudos to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley. And I will just add, we are also going to talk about the policies and priorities of open source systems, agenda item, 7 as well. So hold that thought as well. Commissioner Volsi.
I just want to echo what has been said, but I really felt really moved to say to you, this is fantastic and really well done. Very, as you said, very clear. I am one of those people who looks at it. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait. And so this is very clear, and I really appreciate the emphasis on making sure it's accessible. There are a lot of people who are in our city, are citizens, and who need language assistance for voting. And this is so important. So I want to echo everything and just say thank you so much. That must have taken a lot of time, and I really appreciate it because it's really what we need to be doing as a city. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Losey. Commissioner Parker?
I'll just pile on. Thank you. I know this must take so much time, and I do kind of nerd out, and luckily not one who does get confused about RCV, but but I do have to do lots of clicks to get to all the places and all of that every time. And so, but also I appreciate your memo was also very clear. And so hopefully that's helpful for the public also to understand this. And kind of the last thing I wanted to comment is that I really appreciate that you're speaking with and working with Director Arnst on this. And I'm happy to hear that this is, while it may not be a current project that the department has been working on, that there was interest and that the code was seen as good and a good starting place. And maybe that could make this sort of an effort easier, fewer barriers to actually do it in the future. So I really appreciate that communication and partnership, so that this is something that we could move forward with in the future, because I think it's really important and great. So thank you.
Commissioner Dye?
And I just wanted to address Commissioner Hayden Crowley's comment. As I understand it, this is actually taking the output of the Dominion system, so it's not messing with anything. So there shouldn't be any problem with running it against the entire election. It wouldn't have to just be limited to one contest. Is that correct?
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Commissioner Bernholz, was your hand up? Or no? Okay, I thought I saw it off screen. Thank you so much, everyone. I had just 2 comments to make. Thank you as well, Vice President Jordanek. Thank you as well to the director for his openness, and also love seeing collaboration and discussion between the 2 groups. I also wanted to add that I did receive an email from a representative of the Asian Law Caucus who wrote in saying that they couldn't be here, but really support this effort, particularly around language access. And so I did want to elevate that as a public comment that was unable to be made here, but I did receive that email directly and wanted to elevate it so folks know. Anything else about that topic? VP Jordanek, did you have any other comments or anything specific to the commissioner's reports that you wanted to add? Okay, great. Anyone else about commissioners? Any other reports? Okay, I have a handful of notes that I wanted to add. So Director Arnst beat me to the jump on the computers. He and I had discussed this prior to the meeting, and I said, Commissioner Hayden Crowley is going to ask about the laptops, so we should probably have a plan for what to communicate. So thank you so much to the director for working on that, and hopefully by the end of the year, at the latest, we might actually have computers. Very exciting. Second, something that came up in the last meeting that maybe was going to be discussed this meeting, but now will be punted to the next meeting, is the process for when the department may have proposed legislation that they want to present to the Board of Supervisors for specific pieces of legislation. And so Director Arnst and I have spoken about this, and we are in conversation about it. And so that will be a discussion item for the next meeting. Rest assured, we will have that conversation. And I know also folks had asked about the circumstances around AB 1416 and opting out of local ballot measure labeling. We will talk about that again sometime soon, not immediately. I first want to focus on what the process would be, and then have that come up as well. So please note both of those topics will at some point will be revisited. Third, which we'll get a little bit more into on agenda item number 7, so I don't want to kind of cannibalize that conversation, specifically around voter registration. But one thing I did want to mention is that I have, in some of the conversations that I've had with Director Arntz around voter registration and looking at the data in San Francisco, I had also reached out to a journalist from Mission Local who has what's called a neighborhood map, where you can toggle and see all kinds of things on the map that are, you know, household income by neighborhood, demographic information. And I have been in conversation with them about potentially including voter registration information into that neighborhood map, so folks can toggle and see perhaps some parts of the city based on who's actually registered to vote. It's actually a little bit more complicated, but I just wanted to share that full transparency, that I think it would be great to be able to take what the department already does in terms of looking at voter registration and being able to bring that data to places where people are actually reading their news, where people are consuming information, rather than necessarily saying, hey, I want to go to the Department of Elections website to find that information. I think it's just one other nice little gesture toward transparency. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that is resurfacing the Elections Commission offsite, which we're now working between 2 different dates, but Secretary Davis and I toured a space where we would have a public conversation, like have a meeting after we do the warehouse tour, which will be ideally, the meeting will take place at North Beach Public Library. The space is really beautiful. Big kudos to Secretary Davis for finding that space. And so more to come, but I am committed to this happening. I know, much to everyone's chagrin, but it will be good and a good experience for everyone to see the warehouse as well. So those are all of my updates. Did anyone have any comments or questions before we move to public comment? Okay, Secretary Davis, will you please move to public comment on agenda item number 5?
Yes.
That happened very quickly. We're going to hold off on public comment for just one more minute. Commissioner Lavolsi.
It's just a question about the offsite. Is that going to be a day-long event, and how much advance notice could you give us, do you think?
You have an email in your inbox.
Okay.
So you have advance notice,
Okay.
but it will be a half day in the afternoon.
Perfect. Okay.
But feel free to let me know any
Okay,
concerns.
thank you.
Yeah. I'm trying to get it to people quickly. Was that anything else? Okay. VP Jordanek.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for doing the work to organize the offsite. I know it's hard to put events like that together, so thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, now we're actually moving to public comment.
Okay, yes, we have some attendees who'd like to make a comment. My first one is Pedro Hernandez. You are unmuted. Can you hear me?
It's not
It's not unmuted.
That's
Jen. That's all.
Mr. Hernandez.
This is Lauren with the League of Women Voters. I was just unmuted.
okay. Thanks, Lauren. Just bear with us for one moment.
Sure.
That's okay. So now, yeah, there you go. There he is. Now
Can
he's.
you hear me okay?
Oh,
Yes.
yes, we can hear
Just
you.
one moment. We're gonna put the 3 minutes on the.
Okay, you're good to go.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And thank you, President Stone. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Pedro Hernandez. I'm the Legal and Policy Director for California Common Cause. We wanted to provide public comment to communicate our support and encouragement for this item, specifically the translated election results for the RCV detailed, or the contest, for the RCV contest, the detailed results. San Francisco has been a model for strong language access outreach, for having a strong language program and outreach program, an active LAC, that's the Language Access Advisory Committee, and for going beyond state requirements and providing language ballots in Filipino and Tagalog. In fact, the department recently shared with the state LAC, which I'm on, recommendations for best practices for establishing and maintaining a county LAC, and we appreciate Director Arntz and the election department staff for their incredible work. The project to move election results in multiple languages is encouraging to us. Providing multi-language election results for RCV contests will help residents in San Francisco have a greater transparency and clarity of election results. Currently, several pages are translated, which is great. However, having detailed results readily available and translated will give voters a greater sense of the finality of RCV contests. We thank the Commission, Director Arntz, and their staff for their work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next person is a call-in. And can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you're good to go.
Great. This is Lauren Girardin with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. Thank you for raising the important issues of accessibility and language access for ranked choice votes, results reporting, and just clarity and consistency of communication of results. Elections are difficult enough to understand as it is. Even those of us who spend a lot of time looking at elections, I know we all have moments where we struggle. And obviously, I think I heard lots of agreement on this, but we shouldn't make it harder or impossible for some folks in our community to know the results of their elections. Results that can be read by assistive devices such as screen readers are used by many people, not just those with no or reduced vision, but also people with cognitive issues and dexterity issues. And then there's all those folks that may not understand English, or they need something like this explained in a language that they're more comfortable with. So the League of Women Voters strongly encourages San Francisco to take decisive steps beyond already what's been done, which is great, to make this key election information equally accessible to all as soon as possible. Not just because certain accessibility and language access things are mandated by layers of law, but because every San Franciscan deserves to know the results of elections that will affect their lives and their community. And we love that this presentation has shown that there is a path for a reasonable and viable solution. Thanks so much for all of this hard work.
Thank you. Okay, my next caller is Jen. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yep, I can hear you. Hi, this is Jen Fay with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. I just wanted to add to the RCV results page just that, so I was actually it might be related to the current San Francisco elections official results page, because I was toggling the demo and I was looking at the translate pages. In the Chinese page, I noticed that the names, like, they don't translate the candidates' names into the Chinese names that they use for elections. And then I went back and I looked at the SF officials the SF elections official results page, the one from November 2022, and I toggled that in Chinese. And I also noticed that they didn't translate the candidates' names either in Chinese. So I guess it's I don't know moving forward if we would do that, especially to get folks who are Chinese speaking to understand candidates' names. But just a suggestion and pointing it out for the official results page. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have another participant. It's Preston Jordan. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much for introducing me, Commissioner for taking this up, and Vice President Jordanic for doing the work of creating this code and putting together a clear memo. I'm a city council member from the small city of Albany across the bay in Alameda County, which is perhaps a clue as to why I'm following this. I imagine the goings on in Alameda County are of some pressing knowledge because many things have been on the front page, made front page news, unfortunately. The report that was put together, the reporting style, I just want to commend it for describing the first and last round up front. That's not something I've seen before, and I think it's sorely needed. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters, and unfortunately, not even its Voters Edge reports who has won an election accurately. So even today, if you go and look at the 2022 mayor's race, it only shows the first round results, and it treats it as a its algorithm treats it as a plurality election and designates the winner based on the first round results. And so Voters Edge currently shows that Lauren Taylor won that election, which is obviously problematic. So I think the advance of showing both first and last round results would be very helpful. I also appreciate that it orders the candidates in order from most to least support, which helps make it clear that it's simply a series of runoff voting elections. And I didn't preface all this by saying one of the reasons I'm interested in is Albany is the most recent city to start using ranked choice in the Bay Area. It first used ranked choice in 2022, and to make things perhaps little trickier to understand, it's using the multi-seat form, proportional representation form. So that puts even another layer of need for clear communication on it. So I will say more under item 7, but I just wanted to appreciate the work and some of the features that I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another call in. 597 number or 97 number. Can you hear me?
Hello, this is David Schmidt. Can you hear me?
We sure can. You're good to go.
Are we on agenda item number 7?
We are not.
Okay, then I will wait until we get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer, can you hear me?
Yeah, this is John Palmer. Can you hear me?
Sure can. You're good to go.
Please consider my comments here for this item and item number 7. I've got a timing issue on that, so I'm going to have to sign off.
Mr. Palmer, it's actually a little bit difficult to hear you. Would you mind speaking into your phone a little bit more?
Okay, I'm speaking into my laptop. Can you hear it?
It's a little better, but it's still slightly hard to hear you.
How about now?
That's better.
Okay. I want to thank all of you commissioners for serving the city the way you are, and I particularly want to thank Vice President Jordanic for all the work he's done. I've voted in San Francisco for over 30 years, and I've been a business owner in San Francisco for most of that time. I've been a longtime ranked choice voting supporter, and I find the current reporting, as has been enumerated here tonight, quite confusing when you go there and you can't see, who has won a ranked choice contest on that first page. So I think what Vice President Jordanic has developed here as the 2-column format, which gives you the initial tally and then the final tally, is just fantastic. It's a giant leap forward. So I hope the commission will adopt that format as soon as you possibly can. It's much clearer. I think it gives others what they need. It gives kind of the press what they need if they want to cite, if a candidate that's been eliminated wants to say, wants to see how many votes they got, or their supporters want to see how many votes they got. That's in column number 1, but they want to see who won the contest. That's right there for them as well. It gives, I think, everybody what they need, and I hope you'll adopt it. And it's also got all the other benefits that Vice President Jordanek enumerated earlier, which was, hovering over an item to get a definition. Excellent benefit. So I thank you, Vice President Jordanek, for what you've done, and I hope you, the commission, will adopt all of this as soon as possible. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chesson, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Thank you very much.
You're good to go.
Thank you. My name is Steve Chesson. I'm a member of the Santa Clara County Citizens Advisory Commission on Elections, known as CASE, but I am not speaking on behalf of CASE tonight, although my testimony is informed by my participation on CASE. I'm very impressed with the RCV results reporting that Vice President Jordanek demonstrated. Santa Clara County uses the same Dominion equipment that San Francisco uses, and while no jurisdiction in Santa Clara County currently uses ranked choice voting, and the county has yet to obtain the ranked choice voting module from Dominion, both the county and jurisdictions within the county are considering changing their elections to use ranked choice voting. I hope San Francisco implements what Commissioner Jordanek has demonstrated, because if San Francisco implements it and keeps it as open source, then our county, when and if it implements ranked choice voting, would be able to use it as well. And I think this would be a great service to the ranked choice voting community, not just in San Francisco, but throughout California. Thank you very much.
We're good.
So we're ready.
Thank you, Secretary Davis. That closes out agenda item number 5, Commissioners' reports. We'll now move to agenda item number 6, fair, independent, and effective redistricting for community engagement and committee updates, discussion and possible action on updates from the July to September convenings at the Commission's temporary fair, independent, and effective redistricting for community engagement committee. One little caveat is that we have talked about trying to keep this somewhat under 20 minutes if possible. And we'll obviously, we have been talking for a long time about redistricting, and we will make sure that there will be more time, obviously, at the next meeting as well. So I really appreciate the committee's willingness to follow that, and Commissioner Dye in particular as the chair of that committee. Thank you for that. I will hand it over to you to start us off with some updates.
Great. Thank you, President Stone. So while the rest of the commission was taking a summer break, the Affairs Committee continued to meet. We met 3 times in each of the last 3 months, July 31st, August 24th, and again on September 5th. Our July 31st meeting featured a special guest speaker, Dr. Sarah Sadwani, who was able to address us in her capacity not only as a 2020 California Citizens Redistricting Commissioner, but also as one of the academics that was working on proposed reforms for Los Angeles. And so we got to hear a little bit about the debacle in LA and some of the suggested reforms to address that. We did hear from Dr. Sadwani that San Francisco's redistricting task force is considered to be a political commission because of its political appointments, despite its otherwise independent status. And then we spent the August and September meetings, 6 hours of meetings going through each of the major reforms that have been proposed to this commission and have also been reflected in state legislation AB 1248 and AB 764, both of whom have passed our legislature at this point and are awaiting the governor's signature. We have a couple of attachments here. One thing that we put together was a set of basic talking points about the redistricting initiative, which we discussed and approved, so that anyone who gets inquiries from the media or members of the public can answer consistently. The second item is actually the April 19th, 2022 city attorney memo that was addressed to the redistricting task force when it was apparent they were going to miss the deadline that's stipulated in the charter. And the reason I included that, some of us who were on the commission back then saw this memo at that time, but several of our members have joined more recently and may not have seen it. But this was just to point out that because our city charter has a special deadline for redistricting, that it's not consistent with the state deadline, it also means that none of the state remedies would apply to us. And the city attorney had explained that to the redistricting task force. So some of you may remember that put the redistricting task force in the situation of negotiating directly with Director Arnst to see how far they could miss the deadline by and not completely screw up the following elections. And the final item is the main item I want to talk about tonight. And I want to thank and recognize in particular Commissioner Parker, who spent a lot of time pulling this together, compiling and synthesizing many previous tables and reports that I had done, but incorporating the state legislation, which of course had not actually been proposed at the time that we had looked at this in 2022. So in order to try to abide by President Stone's limited time here, what I thought I would do is quickly run through each of the categories, assuming everyone had a chance to look at the deck and saw that we had divided the reforms into 7 different buckets. And let me just run through kind of our preliminary consensus that the Fierce Committee discussed and where we landed on each of these items. We did not actually take an official vote because we realized that many of these reforms are interdependent. And so in the same way that the state legislation is kind of a package of reforms, we also needed to look at this as a package of reforms. So starting first with, well, before I go through each one, I should say that in many cases, we did not find strong reasons to deviate from the proposed state legislation. And so I'm just going to note when there were some deviations. So the first major reform was the composition and of course the diversity and the structure of the proposed independent redistricting commission. I'm just going to use the acronym IRC moving forward. Basically, after discussing all the different structures of other similar IRCs in the Bay Area and around, we did not see a strong reason to deviate from the proposed legislation in 1248, which is a commission, an IRC consisting of 14 members with 2 alternates, 8 of them randomly selected from a pool of the 40 most qualified candidates that are elevated by a vetting body. And then the other 6 would be selected by those 8, keeping in mind some diversity factors. And those would include gender, race and ethnicity, location, and socioeconomic status. These are the same, basically, they reflect the exact same diversity factors that were used to put together the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. noting that there's a slight deviation from the state legislation, which actually requires that the first 8 be from different existing districts. And in our discussion, we didn't actually want anything for the IRC to mirror existing districts, which of course may be gerrymandered. And so what we discussed is that the geographic diversity, which that third location factor should not be tied to a district per se, but more to look at the diversity of San Francisco neighborhoods and regions of San Francisco. Because, for example, there might be an artificial distinction that runs through a neighborhood because that's how the district was drawn. And, you know, you wouldn't want to not choose someone. They might live quite close to each other. You'd want to consider if they're from the same neighborhood and then maybe pick someone from a different neighborhood. And so, so it's a slight deviation from 1248. We think it's better. And then the other thing that we discussed in this about diversity was the importance of having equitable stipends. As you know, the current redistricting task force is not paid at all, just like us. And basically everyone we talked to, all the former redistricting task force members and every good government group has recommended some kind of stipend, and the state legislation also recommends a stipend. We talked about equitable stipends, and so didn't come up with a specific number. We think that's something for the Board of Supervisors to figure out by ordinance at some other point, but we did want to look at San Francisco's history of doing an equitable stipend, such as their Be the Jury program that tries to encourage participation by low-income residents. So San Francisco already has a strong history of doing something equitably, and so looking at that as a potential model. So the rationale for this is that it's basically consistent with the gold standard, California Citizens Redistricting Commission, and other successful local IRCs, all of which have 13 to 14 members to ensure better representation. I'm just going to mention a couple specifics. LA County has 14 members. Sacramento has 13 plus 2 alternates. Berkeley's IRC has 13 members. Oakland has 13 members plus 2 alternates. We heard directly from the president of the Long Beach IRC, which also has 13 members and 2 alternates. And so basically, we didn't see a strong reason to deviate from what has been proven. And with the exception that we think that the geographic diversity should not be based on existing districts. So that was the first major reform. The second one was on outreach and recruitment. Our preliminary consensus was that a comprehensive outreach and public education plan be required to build a large candidate pool that's representative of San Francisco's demographics. It should be an open, competitive application process that is accessible, available in language, and is not overly burdensome to encourage more people to apply. And part of that would include public reporting on the size and demographics of the pool. That's something that worked very effectively at the state level and caused people to kind of get the word out when they realized that the pool wasn't looking very, representative, for example. And one thing we discussed here was to consider a separate city agency with experience in outreach to run this phase of the selection process, and to ensure that there's adequate funding. Because if you don't start with a big enough pool, you're not going to get a great IRC out of this. This is very consistent with both the Fair Maps Act and AB 764. Some of the possible agencies that might run a good outreach process that we discussed include the Department of Elections. We just heard all about the outreach they've continued to do. The Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, and there may be others in the city. So in general, we wanted to encourage the city to leverage its own infrastructure to do this well. And also to look at some of the really creative outreach that the city of Long Beach did, which also has a very diverse population. Like they did inserts in utility bills, they leveraged the DMV using libraries, et cetera. And basically a rationale for this is that in order to create a well-qualified and representative body, it's necessary to basically source broadly from the full talent of the city, not just politically connected people, and that the public reporting would provide that kind of accountability. And again, leverage the city's existing resources. Okay. The next reform we looked at was the qualifications and restrictions. So as you know, there are no standard qualification criteria or any ban on conflicts of interest currently for redistricting task force members. So our consensus was that this should be open to all San Francisco residents. In other words, in particular, there's no requirement that they be a registered voter. And that's consistent with AB 1248. It's the only residency requirement. And then there'll be subjective qualifications such as the ability to be impartial, relevant skills, and an understanding of San Francisco's diversity and demographics. This is consistent with the same three qualifications for the California Citizens Redistricting Commissions. We had extensive discussions on what relevant skills might include, including good communications, being a good listener, collaboration, critical thinker, analytical, someone who understands data, and disqualifying conflicts of interest for a candidate if the candidate, his or her spouse or direct family members have been candidates, elected officials, staffers, major donors, or lobbyists for the previous certain number of years. Financial disclosures would be required, and that they would not be allowed to run in these districts that they drew for 10 years for one census cycle, essentially. Again, this is very consistent with AB 1248. We did have some question about what the length of residency should be. That might be an issue that's resolved by the city attorney. I think that DCAs have pointed out that other commissions don't require more than 1 year. On the other hand, it does require certain knowledge of San Francisco in order to be effective in redistricting. So this is something that we felt Board of Supervisors should get community input on. And there were some questions also about the length of pre-service disqualifications. What is the look back period essentially? And again, this is a proven combination of both objective and subjective criteria to find the most qualified candidates. And it's also consistent with the Redistricting Task Force recommendation to consider the California Citizens Redistricting Commission commissioners' criteria and qualifications. The next item we looked at was the actual vetting and selection process. As you know, that this is the main reason that San Francisco would fall under state legislation is because of our political appointments. So our preliminary recommendation is looking at non-political vetting and selection of finalists by a trusted, adequately resourced body or bodies that leverage existing city capabilities, systems, and processes. So this could entail different agencies for the outreach and recruitment phase, as mentioned before, and the actual vetting and selection from the finalist pool. And main rationale here is restoring public trust in the process. And it's key to faith and fair elections. And obviously, we would need to comply if AB 1248 should pass. We recommend that the Board of Supervisors hold public community input hearings on which bodies are trusted by the public and are staffed and capable of running an effective vetting and selection process. Some of the possibilities that we discussed include the Controller's Office, the Department of Elections, the City Clerk, and possibly a panel with representatives from other various bodies. I want to note that there were late amendments by the Senate made to AB 1248, which essentially gives us as a city and county a menu of possible choices of vetting and selection bodies that would comply with state law, assuming it gets signed into law. So there are some good ideas there, but San Francisco could also come up with its own possible vetting and selection body on its own. Moving on to the next item, removal and replacement of commissioners. As you know, they currently serve at the pleasure of their appointing authority. This was stipulated in the ordinance the Board of Supervisors drew up to establish the redistricting task force. We believe that we should allow people to resign if they can no longer serve, especially if it's a longer period of service, which is something that we're considering recommending. And that removal would only be if the IRC itself determines that a member is guilty of neglect of duty, gross misconduct, or misrepresented themselves in order to qualify. And then the IRC would then choose one of the two qualified alternates that, of course, had to meet the same requirements as everyone who is serving as an IRC member. Basically, if it's truly an independent body, they should be able to make their own decision. It should not have to go back to the vetting and selection body, since they already chose the vetted alternates. Moving on to redistricting line drawing criteria. We believe, consistent with the Fair Maps Act and AB 764, that it should be replaced with explicit rank criteria, including compliance with federal law and case law, and use the existing state criteria and definition of communities of interest that's in the Fair Maps Act. And importantly, require a final report to include the rationale for the map lines based on that rank criteria. Again, no strong rationale to deviate from the accepted best practices. Just a comment here on case law, using case law for population deviation. In case that evolves, then San Francisco would automatically evolve with it instead of having its own special criteria for population equality. Next one is on training and preparation of the commission. Basically, we felt it was important to require minimally the same legal training for permanent commissions, i.e. all the training that we went through on the Sunshine Act, for example, the Brown Act, and as well as practical training like on the Voting Rights Act, Robert's Rules, census data and mapping shortly after seating. Even the RDTF members noted in their own report that the mapping training came way too late for them. And then another comment is to consider leveraging the experience of former California Citizens Redistricting members, IRCs, and former RDTF members to train the new ones. On transparency, we came out agreeing with the ban on ex parte communication and requiring disclosure. That was where this redistricting task, last one, got into a lot of trouble with concerns about secret meetings, that there should be a 7-day advance posting for maps, and comments should be posted on the website so that, you know, they're truly public, and that there should be a required written rationale, as mentioned before, in their final report. The RDTF members had asked to be shielded from inappropriate public influence in their own recommendations. And so these are a couple of things that we felt made a lot of sense. Moving on to voting and decision-making. As you know, the current redistricting task force only needs a simple majority to make any decisions. Consistent with AB 1248, we agreed with a supermajority of 9 out of 14 voting members. We felt that 9 was not an onerous supermajority. It's only one more vote than a majority. But the larger body and this supermajority requirement lessens the possibility of a majority faction that dominates and stops listening to the rest of the IRC. So it allows for dissent, but promotes collaboration as people work to get that supermajority. Moving on to missed deadline, as you know, basically, the city attorney had to write a long memo about this because it just wasn't clear what happened, if the deadline was missed. And basically, we think that it makes sense to go with state remedies, which is to punt it to Superior Court, something that's not available to us because we have our own special deadline. So we would recommend removing it so that we could just follow the state process. So that's something that we talked about, and we are almost in the home stretch here on funding. Basically, we defer to the detailed recommendations that were put forward by Ms. Calvillo, the city clerk. Should be a transparent budget, including equitable stipends and reimbursements for expenses incurred by commissioners in the course of their duties, and that supporting departments, such as the Department of Elections, if they are stipulated, and anyone else, should actually receive an appropriate budget augmentation. There was only minor budget augmentation last time, and there was a lot of shuffling and a lot of overtime, I think, by the city attorney's office to try to support the redistricting task force, and that shouldn't happen. It's a significant endeavor. It only happens once every 10 years, and people should not, agencies should not be expected to just kind of make do with business as usual kind of budgets. Long Beach's IRC was accounted for in 3 different budget years to cover everything from the outreach piece all the way to closing down and finalizing the maps. So some of the local expense reimbursement we thought about was local transportation or providing a Clipper card, parking, meals for extended meetings, caregiving expenses that might be needed to enable full participation. And we also thought that the IRC should have influence in selecting key consultants and their scope of work. That was a big problem this time, that the RDTF didn't agree with the consultants that were chosen for them. Timing and the draft maps. Basically, this came from the city clerk's recommendations that the ordinance that establishes the IRC should be passed 18 to 24 months prior to the map deadline. And this IRC should be seated at least 12 months before the final map deadline. So currently the deadline is tied to the census, and that was obviously problematic since the census was late this last time. And that a draft map, an official draft map is required at least 2 months before the final map, because a lot of the challenges the RDTF experienced this time was just having not enough time for people to respond to the draft map. And there should be a 7-day comment period before any kind of map adoption. We basically felt that San Francisco's size and complexity, it warrants a year to allow adequate time for an IRC to get trained, to get organized, to solicit community input, to have all their meetings, to create and draft the maps, to solve any problems with the community, and to refine a final map. And then last but not least, I think that was last, actually.
I think that's last.
That was last. Okay, so I tried, but I think I got through all of it. So there was a lot of consensus. We wanted to kind of write everything out and then look at it as a package, and then we'll do an official vote. The Fierce Committee will not be able to meet again, unfortunately, before our next meeting in October. The good news is we will actually know whether the governor has signed the state legislation by then. So that will, solve one of the mysteries. And if he doesn't sign, we have the option to move forward with our own version. But basically, as you can see, with some minor exceptions, we think that the state legislation is pretty good and well thought out.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye and Chair. Before we open it up for full discussion, I want to give an opportunity for the other committee members, Commissioner Volsi, Commissioner Parker, if there's anything specifically you wanted to add to that as well. No?
Just, I guess, just to reiterate, I think it's been, these last few meetings that we've had have been very helpful in just providing more clarity. I think putting together the talking points, making sure we're on the same page about how we're talking about what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And then walking through these different areas kind of just forced us to start talking about them because we're not going to get to recommendations to you all until we've actually had those conversations as a committee and instead of just listening to panelists and things. So I think it's been a useful discussion, and I think we are getting close, in the consensus types of things we're doing. So we'll have some final recommendations, I think, after our October meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Parker. Was that a hand? Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Thank you, President Stone, and thank you very much, Commissioner Dye and Commissioner Lavolsi and Commissioner Parker for all of your hard work on this project. I guess it's a lot of work, and you have really put in a lot of time on this. And I think that you are to be commended for your commitment to good government and to trying to make this process fair. So that we have fair, functional, free elections. I have to say I'm really kind of confused at this point, just because when I was reading this over today, and I was also looking up the status on AB 1248 and the other piece of legislation. It would appear that passed on September 13th, both chambers, and that the governor has 12 days to sign it. So that would put us, assuming that they count the weekends, that would put us at September 25th, we'll know? Or would that be, well, you add 12 days to the 13th, it's September 25th. If it doesn't include the weekends, then it pushes us out probably another 5 days, 5 or 7 days. So pretty soon we'll know. And the vote at the assembly was like 62 to 12 or something like that. So there's a lot of support across the state, at least. And I know that the governor, I think last time, vetoed some comparable legislation. So I don't know what his disposition is on this, where he's going to go with this. But I guess my confusion after looking at all of that, there's a couple things. I was confused also about the public comment, just because I didn't understand why that the public has every right to say what they want to say, but how they would think we would have any kind of influence over legislation at the state level that's been passed. So number one, that there's that. But number two, if it is passed, does that supersede anything that we might want to do here? So all of your hard work, then 1248 would be the rule of the state, so to speak. So that would be my next observation as a person who did not do all the hard work that you did. But I'm just trying to kind of put it all together. And I know that the time period probably is a little later than what we all had hoped, but is there a reason that the Board of Supervisors would take this up once state legislation is passed? Because let me just say this, from my observation, again, as a voting citizen of San Francisco for, almost 50 years, I'm watching the Board of Supervisors closely and seeing where we are in this city. If they have legislations that's been given to them on a silver platter, and they have so many pressing issues right now, no matter how wonderful this legislation is, in my humble opinion, it's unlikely that they'll take it up, because they've got to deal with some, the viability of San Francisco going forward. I mean, just on a purely economic level, their move, and housing, and climate change, and just like existential issues. And I'm not trying to diminish this, because I think the survival of our democracy is number one. But if there's already legislation that's there that supersedes anything at the local level, there's no incentive, is what I'm saying. So anyway, that's just my observation, and I'll let you all respond. Thank you again for all of your hard work.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley and Commissioner Dye. If you don't mind, just like listing those questions so we can let VP Jordanic speak, ask his questions, and then we'll bring it back to you once folks have had, if that's okay. Okay, Vice President Jordanic.
Yeah, I also just want to thank you. This is obviously a lot of work and a lot of time. And I hope you get to take a break at some point, you know, like we did. So, so one of the challenges the commission has had, it's kind of been a challenge and a couple of times in the past was like dealing with the media. And I wanted to know what your strategy is with the media. Like, are you having spokespeople? And I know there was an article in the Chronicle, I want to say like maybe a month ago or so, but someone could just fill us in on that.
Is that your only question?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Commissioner Dye.
Okay, so Commissioner Hayden Crowley, so I'm going to defer to the DCA to answer that question about whether weekends are counted. I know that there's a final deadline when he has to sign all legislation, but do you have a definitive answer from us? Is it the 25th?
It is 12.
She's a mic. So I looked that up on the internet today.
The middle one. Yeah, there you go. You got it. Right there.
Thanks for your question. It is 12 days for the governor to sign. I would need to get back to you about what the rules are for counting. Days are not always days.
Right. I don't know. I just read the internet. That's it.
Okay, so we're not sure about that, but in any case, we will know before our next commission meeting.
And the governor has the option to approve without signing as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Yes. Just to give you a little color, because I asked a number of the sponsors what was behind the reason for the governor not signing a previous version of this bill. And he did indicate that he thought the bill had a lot of good points, but apparently one of the major reasons is that there were several city and county associations that had opposed it. Most of them were smaller, as you might expect, smaller rural counties who were concerned about having to, put in this infrastructure. My understanding from my contacts who have been monitoring all of the amendments, that several of these associations have withdrawn their opposition. Part of it was because there was originally a line in, I think it was AB 764, that essentially allowed any member of the public to sue if they were not complying with the law, because there were, as you read in some of the other reports on the promise of fair maps, there were a lot of issues with non-compliance. They didn't post the stuff on the website in time or whatever. And so I could understand if I were a city or county executive, I'd be very concerned about being sued if I made a mistake or, I didn't have the resources to get everything quite right. So that was removed in one of the amendments. And I have to say the amendment process really works because every time it's been amended, I think it's been an improvement. We've been watching all the amendments. So that's one of the reasons. And I think another reason that Governor Newsom stated was that this was an unfunded state mandate. And the rationale that the sponsors of the bills have made is that most cities and counties have at least advisory commissions already, and it costs them money to run those, so that there's not a big difference in just stipulating a different form. So, so the hope is that that has been addressed at least somewhat. We will see. So that's what I can share from the information that I know about what was behind some of his opposition. Hopefully, it has gotten better in this revision, and there's more support. As you noted, it's broadly supported by both the Assembly and the Senate, very high votes, including from our senator. Your other question is what happens if the state legislation is in fact signed into law. So the way the legislation is written, it is only if we don't do something that we are forced into the standard default format. So what AB 1248 is, it imposes a default IRC if you don't have an IRC. San Francisco is not considered to have an IRC because of our political appointment process. So if we were to pass a charter amendment that came up with an IRC that met the definition under state law, then our charter would prevail. However, my understanding is that we would not be allowed to do any less than what the state legislation stipulates. We'd be allowed to do more. We would, provide more restrictions and, more conflicts of interest that we would look at, et cetera. So it produces a floor of what a minimum IRC should look like. So, so that's what the lawyers tell me. And then regarding the media strategy, that is why we put the talking points together, was to answer that and make sure, and it was a good thing we had discussed that, because right after that, I got a call from the Chronicle reporter. And I thought the article was pretty good, actually. It actually got Supervisor Melgar on the record as looking at November instead for a possible charter amendment. And I have been in contact with her chief of staff, and they're still moving forward with it and interested in working on it. Obviously, they are also interested in hearing what the Elections Commission would recommend. And now there's actually time to hear our recommendation. Whereas before they had been looking at March and we're looking at moving forward without a recommendation. So that is the status as I know it.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. So I had some thoughts that I wanted to add as well. So just one is more of a technical thing about the selection criteria for task force members. One thing that came up actually in conversation with the director as it pertains to voter registration and looking at districts versus neighborhoods is neighborhoods are actually, it's kind of a gray area, right? And so one thing you might consider is precincts. Looking at it maybe from the how the department is actually determining, for example, where Dropbox locations. He uses a map from the Center for Inclusive Democracy, who I think I've spoken about them a couple of times. I included them in something for agenda item number 7, and it's intended to help elections departments have equitable criteria for how they pick locations for Dropbox and polling locations, in addition to also helping inform about voter outreach efforts. You might consider talking to the director about geography, because neighborhoods, like I said, can also pose, I get into arguments with people in San Francisco all the time who say that they live in one neighborhood, and I'm like, that's not really that neighborhood. I think there is some gray area, so you might want to just explore that. But that's not a requirement, it's just an idea. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the process and next steps, because you did give us a pretty robust walkthrough of kind of where you are in terms of consensus and some areas where they're different, which I think is very helpful. And also knowing what's going to happen at the state level, what happened before our next meeting, and also that the committee won't be able to meet until after our next meeting. I think it would be helpful to kind of lay out a process. So from my point of view, and I would be open to hear other commissioners' thoughts, I think that it would be valuable for the committee to obviously finalize where they are, where consensus is, where consensus isn't, but also may just leave for the Board of Supervisors, should we pass along recommendations to them, to figure out, but really come up with the final slate that the committee can vote on, and then come back to the Elections Commission as a full body, present to us what was voted on for us to discuss and then vote on. as it pertains to two things. One, what you are recommending, and two, how we want to move forward with that. So one of the things that I noticed in the Chronicle article was some confusion around the process for this, that I think I would just want to reiterate here for everyone's knowledge. I know we've talked about this. This won't be anything new, but the committee's mandate is to develop recommendations for the Elections Commission, and the commission will then review those recommendations and make a decision about what to put forward to the Board of Supervisors. So I know you have mentioned, obviously, speaking with elected officials. You mentioned just now that you had also spoken with Supervisor Malgar's Chief of Staff, but I just want to be sure that how we're representing this in the public and to electeds is very much in the context of what we're working on as an update, but not as, you know, for example, how it's being presented from one commissioner as the representative of the commission's recommendations, because we have not made recommendations yet. So just again, to lay out the process, the committee will, you know, make their final slate, present that, make a vote on it, hopefully, and then present on whatever was voted to the Elections Commission, for the Elections Commission to then discuss, vote on, and make a decision around how it will then be presented or not, I imagine will be, to the electeds. The other thing I wanted to mention about that I think would be really valuable is it's incredible what your committee has done. I just want to resurface the kudos that have been given. I obviously love the Montreal design of these slides as well. I have to add, like the little arts edition, add some pizzazz to sometimes a difficult topic. So thanks. But I think it would be great if we can actually turn what you've developed into the finalized, like turning questions into answers. What are the answers to these questions that you can then bring to us for us to say, okay, this is what the committee has decided they think the answer to that question is. I kind of think you're already there. It's just writing it down. I think the other part of that will be, once you have those answers written out, how does that differ or not specifically from what happened at the state, like if the state level legislation passes through, making it really clear the differences, the delineations in that written document. So I do imagine that's an enormous undertaking to take so much of what you've already done, which is already a lot, and translate it into that. But I think it would be really valuable for the body to look at a finalized report of what those answers to all of these amazing and important questions are, similarly to what you literally just said. So I think you'll probably need a significant amount of time to do that. It's not going to be at the October meeting, obviously. Maybe November would be a reasonable time, and then the commission can have its final discussion on the topic. I will say, I don't personally, and this is just me speaking as an individual commissioner, not as the president of the commission, I don't personally feel that we would necessarily need to go through step by step in a presentation. I think if you are able to provide a finished report of the committee that we can all read ahead of time, and maybe that isn't even November, maybe it would be December if you need more time, then we'll all make sure we read it in advance and just bring questions to that meeting. And Commissioner Dye, you could also at that time tell us anything that maybe had changed from the last meeting. I think that would be really, really helpful. I feel like we have a light at the end of the tunnel, so congrats on this to Commissioner Dye, who's really spearheaded this, but also Commissioner Parker, Commissioner Volsi, and all of us. This has been a huge amount of work for everyone. So thank you. Thank you so much. That was all for me. Commissioner Dye, was there anything you wanted to, I don't see any other commissioners, but is there anything you wanted to respond to?
Yeah, I completely agree with you that neighborhoods are nebulous. We had the same problem on the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. It actually turns out only San Diego has official neighborhood lines. Nobody else does. in the entire state. And most neighborhood lines are developed by real estate agents.
Yes. And
So
probably from
people would bring
redlining.
different real estate maps and they would show different boundaries. So that was something that we had to grapple with on the CCRC, and that is what we relied on community input to define what those neighborhoods were. But I think that when we discussed this as a committee, our main point was that it shouldn't depend on the previous districts, and it should look at geographic diversity of the city and regions of the city. And so I think your idea, looking at the Center for Inclusive Democracy and a number of different ways to identify what are the important regions of the city that need representation, could be considered. And so that is something that could either be stipulated explicitly, or it could be left up to the vetting and selection agency to define that, how they choose to represent geographic location within the city. On your second point in the process, totally agree with the process. That is our goal, is to basically give you something that you guys can read before the November meeting. And then we also wanted to open it up today. None of the questions or comments have been, outside of President Stone, have been on the actual content. If you have questions or thoughts on kind of any of the preliminary recommendations that we have discussed as a committee, that you want us to take a look at, or issues that you don't think we've addressed in this at least preliminary set of reforms, we can bring them up now, or email me before our next committee meeting to make sure that we try to address it, so that by the time November comes around, it will be complete and hopefully addresses everyone's questions.
Actually, Commissioner Bernholz has her hand up, so I'm going to hand it to her. Yes, Commissioner Bernholz.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for all the work on this. I think I'm getting clear on the process now. I do have a substantive question, and first a point of clarification. I think I heard you say that applicants would be required to provide a financial statement. And if I heard it wrong, fine. If I heard it correctly, I would ask you to reconsider that, because of all the other requirements geared toward inclusivity and diversity. I think that one's a deal killer for a lot of people. I'm also not at all sure what or who would do what or what with someone's financial information. I find that to be a little problematic, but that's my one nitpicky little concern of all the extraordinary work that you've done, and thank you for it.
So just to address that, we agree. In fact, this was one of the big issues with the first California Citizens Redistricting Commission. It was thought that the requirement for financial disclosures was one of the major factors that depressed AAPI candidates from applying. So this would be similar to, so we had a comment in there that it would be, disclosure would be required upon taking office. So it's similar to what's required of the state and what's required of us, a Form 700, basically. So it's not a comprehensive statement. It's just a standard Form 700. But we talked about not requiring it during the application process, but letting candidates know that they would have to disclose before they were seated. So it doesn't depress the applications. But good comment.
I'm not sure I follow the logic on how that doesn't depress the applications, but thank you for your response.
Just to provide a bit of context for many of the commissions in San Francisco, applicants are required to provide a draft Form 700, basically what their Form 700 would look like if they were to be appointed and be required to be a Form 700 filer. Most commissioners are required by the Ethics Code, as you know, to file a Form 700. And generally that draft Form 700 is to ensure that people are not seated who have disqualifying conflicts based on their financial positions, or, employers of their spouses or things like that.
Sorry, Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
So, um, I don't want to sound like a fascist, but I think I'm about to.
After you just said how important democracy was.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the irony that hit me, that we were going to include non-registered voters, but we were going to bar people who'd make contributions to campaigns. And because I suppose that you could say that they would be advocating for the politicians or the government representatives that they had made contributions to for. So that would be a way of disqualifying people that would have potential conflicts of interest.
Can I just
Well,
correct?
Okay, go ahead and
It,
correct.
it's major donors only. So.
But it was $500. Okay, well, in San Francisco, there are a lot of $500 donors because that's the maximum. I've been a $500 donor and I would hate
Not
to be
anymore.
disqualified. I just think it's not right. I really don't. Because for one thing, the people that are able to, that make contributions, I mean, we're not all lobbyists. We have a genuine interest in government and supporting good government, and to disqualify us based on the fact that we made a contribution to somebody that we cared about, I almost feel like you'd lose in a lawsuit on something like that. So
Point of clarification, what is the time period for
it was like 10
donations?
years.
I think in 1248, it's the previous 7 years, 7 or 8 years, I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that's, I don't think that's right. That's all I'm gonna say. The second thing is that I believe that 1248, when I was glancing at it today, I was doing it fairly, is for counties over 300,000, which would virtually be almost every county in California, except for the ones out in the Sierras. But I did see that it was like the Rural County Association that is on the record as opposing 1248, and I think another one, and they haven't backed off of that. So they're continuing. So that could be a factor in whether Newsom signs it or not. But I just wanted to say that I did see that today. But anyway, I feel like people who aren't registered to vote, we're going to include them in this process, and I want to be inclusive, but to what end? Are we trying to get them engaged when they do or don't? I mean, I don't know. I do think I think that should be a qualification, that you're registered to vote, or someone who's under 18, 16 to 18 that wants to be. I mean, you want people who are engaged. That's just, there's no reason that they can't register to vote. So why don't you?
Well,
Anyway.
thank
Like
you.
I said, I'm sure I sound like a fascist.
Commissioner LaVolsi.
Thank you. Commissioner Hayden Cawley, thank you for your comment. I think I hear your point, and what's important is, I think, in some ways, to eliminate political influence and to level the playing field. And $500 for some is not a lot of money. For some, it's a lot of money. And it's a choice to donate to a campaign. It's an option. It's not a right. There are many reasons why people don't register to vote. Registering to vote doesn't necessarily mean you aren't engaged and you understand, that you don't understand what's going on and that you're not capable of participating. There are many reasons why people don't register to vote. Some of it is because they feel the system's rigged. They feel the system doesn't include them. They feel the system doesn't think about them. But that doesn't mean that they aren't engaged in what is going on politically. So if the goal is to have a more level, because it's never going to be completely level, a more level playing field, and to prevent political influence, I think it's reasonable. Perhaps a recommendation could be less time, not such a large lengthy time. And I think Commissioner Parker looked it up and it said 8 years. AB 1248. AB 1248, 8 years. So that's something that we could think about and recommend. But I would just say the registering the vote piece, I just think we need to be careful about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Volsi. I would love to add to that as well. I think, and just echo a point that Commissioner Volsi made that I think is really resonates with me, the element of choice versus right. I think I very much share in that sentiment. And actually, it's a perfect segue into our next agenda item because there are so many folks in San Francisco who are eligible to vote who are not registered. And, I've been trying to explore this issue for probably a year and a half now, ever since I've been on this commission, talking to community groups, and there's so many reasons to that. And many of them are a lot of what Commissioner Volsi echoed. Some folks don't even know that they can register to vote. There are lots and lots of reasons, and oftentimes it is communities who've been marginalized and suppressed in the democratic process, whereas donors often have a lot of big donors have access. And so I think the element of fair is something I really agree it should be an important consideration. I also think it is the nuanced conversation of length of time. I think it's not so I think knowing you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley, I think you agree actually with so much of what we're saying. I think maybe the length of time is what's most concerning, if I might, don't want to speak for you. 8 years might seem quite lengthy. I mean, for us as a body, I think it's not nowhere anything near that. And we have to be impartial, right? Like we can't contribute to political campaigns in San Francisco. So I do think perhaps the committee could explore and discuss a shorter amount of time. But I don't know if it's like the extremes of one versus the other, but maybe just exploring how to not make it a total barrier. Because if you think about it, I mean, 7 years in someone's life, especially a young person, becomes more of a young adult, and their life and their financial situation may evolve. I agree, but I do think maybe just we talk about what period of time seems more fair as a nice middle ground. I see Commissioner Parker's hand. Commissioner Parker.
Yeah, just to continue on that, we did have, this particular thing, we had some extensive discussion on for the exact same thing, the length of time. And I think the idea behind, 500, which is, that's maxing out to a local candidate. I think the idea behind it, right, is that if you are able to, or let's just say you choose to max out to someone, you are more likely, not guaranteed, to be a bit of a political insider and have a relationship that could influence you in certain ways. It might not. I know plenty of people who have given lots of campaigns and don't have any relationships, and that's not how they work. So there's not a universal for sure. But the debate on the length of time was definitely a healthy debate on the committee, it is 8 years in 1248. We were talking about a range from 5 to 10 years. I mean, I'm thinking even back 10 years in my life, what I was doing then, who do I know, what was I doing? That can really change, and where you sit on things, what you learn in life experience, things can really change. And so I do think that's part of where the nuance is to have some discussion about what is the right length of time.
Thank you, Commissioner Burke. Yeah, Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
I mean, I brought up the register to vote just as a contrast because the point being, and I completely respect what you're saying, and I agree. But the point is that what we're doing with people who contribute, and having run a campaign, and I saw the people that contributed to the candidate. A lot of these people, they probably wouldn't be interested in serving on the redistricting commission, but believe me, they don't have ties to any kind of political power, nor are they interested. And yet we are disqualifying a whole group of people. And so I guess that's just my point is we go out of our way to qualify other people, but and I will tell you another thing that it does is it disincentivizes people who might want to serve from supporting candidates in an election. Perhaps it's just something to think about. I'm just going to put it out there. The length of time, I'm going to tell you, 8 years from now, I'll be 71. I'm not going to serve on your, I mean, give me a break. I'm going to be really old. So, I mean, it's just like, come on. It's when you're young, you don't think 8 years is long, but when you're my age, you do. So I think we do need to look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, so I think the rationale for 8 years is it's based on a census cycle. And so 8 years is from the first election, that's from the new maps. So that's where the 8 years came from. And for the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, the major donor is set at 2,000 because it's at a state level. And as Michelle said, 500 is maxing out at the local level. So I think the question to ask is how many people does it disqualify? So for example, if we only, we required people to be registered voters in San Francisco, that would disqualify 21% of the population. How many people would the $500 donation disqualify?
I really can't answer that, but you might be disqualifying a lot of people who are engaged, who would be interested. That's the point. I mean, it's just a point. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, we need to move on. I just was making a point about something that is probably not even going to matter. So thank you.
Thank you. Did any commissioner, do you have anything you want to say? Anyone else? Yeah, Vice President Giordani.
Yeah, this conversation just makes something occur to me. Like when we do revisit these recommendations as a body, are we gonna like vote on each thing individually or as a in sections or all up or down or?
So so back to the process that President Stone outlined, because these are interdependent, we're going to present it as a package. There may be some items that can be kind of picked off if there's a lot of disagreement, but most of them depend on each other. So.
Thank you. One last point I just wanted to make before we open it to public comment is that I also think it is okay if there are parts of the parts of the suite of recommendations or components of reform that we don't as a body agree on. And I think what we should do in that scenario is simply include that in the final report should we present something to the Board of Supervisors and say, hey, Board of Supervisors, the commission didn't have consensus on this, and we strongly encourage, I think Commissioner Dye already said this, but so I'm just re-elevating it. We strongly encourage robust public comment on this area to ensure that public voice, like communities, have the opportunity to participate in a way that we as a body cannot offer at 8:30 p.m. on September 20th, 2023, right? Because we're just kind of sharing our personal experiences and we're not really talking to folks who may have more want to participate in this conversation than are able to right now. So, and that's just, we're a volunteer body and the Board of Supervisors have it as their full-time job. So I think that's just maybe a little thing to note for the committee and for the chair to maybe just in that final report, how we mark things that the commission did not form consensus on so that we can still perhaps put a suite of recommendations forward and agree to that suite of recommendations, knowing that there are caveats included. The other thing I think that we should talk about is the element of not going line by line by line. I think to ensure that this is not a 20-hour meeting, that's part of why I said, if possible, it would be great to have a finished version, like a report that could be presented to the commission in advance that we review individually. And then each commissioner, perhaps we give everyone equal time to share their thoughts and feedback. And we run through kind of one round of it or something like that, as opposed to individual, the way that it's been done as the committee is going through the reforms. Just trying to be efficient. Obviously, this is incredibly important, but we have also been talking about redistricting for a year and a half. So it won't be the first time we've discuss these things. So just some things to keep in mind, and we can talk process later on. So I think that will wrap the discussion unless anyone has strong feelings, as I'm trying to get us moving along. Anyone else? Okay, let's move to public comment on agenda item number 6.
Hi there, Alan Buradell. And I just first want to say, Commissioner Crowley, I don't think you sound like a fascist. Okay, I just want to point that out. The thing also that I heard though tonight, just a few minutes ago from Commissioner Stone, encourage robust public comment. I think if your recommendation was to the Board of Supervisors, that would be the best recommendation you can make. Because any other recommendation is putting your finger on the scale of this very political concept of redistricting. It's putting your finger on the scale where it's not necessary. We will have that discussion as citizens at the Board of Supervisors. That's where we can have that discussion. But what we hear today is talk about, and I'm not minimizing this, but we hear talk about, whether they're registered voters or not, what are the financial forms, the stipends, things like this. We're not talking about the real heady thing here. And the real heady thing is that we're talking about taking the power away from the mayor and from the Board of Supervisors and giving it to a body like yours or some other body like yours. That's what we're talking about. But that's what's happening, but nobody's talking about it. So I want to encourage a discussion like we're having about these tiny minutia that really don't mean anything. Taking the power away from the mayor and from the Board of Supervisors means a lot. And that is a totally political matter. It's not a best practices matter. These are bodies that have no risk of incumbency protection, but they've been talked about as if they do. They don't have representatives that go out to the community, get information, come back, and then make a recommendation to their appointing authority, and then are kicked out of the room. That happens down in LA. It's 3 members out of the board. The board is 11 members. Okay, so 3 redistricting task force members. There's no incumbency protection there. And same with the mayor. She's district-wide. So we're talking about taking power away from 2 bodies on a very important political matter of redistricting. So can we please have discussion about that up here and think about that before you make a recommendation, and let your recommendation be to point to these discussions as a resource. That would be a good solution here, but making a recommendation for a charter amendment is not.
Thank you. I don't know if they can hear you.
For the online attendees, we have Russia. Sorry. Where'd you go?
Good evening, Commissioner, Vice President, Russia and members. Russia Chavez Cardenas with California Common Cause. I'm the Voting Rights and Redistricting Program Manager. We've produced a report in partnership with a number of civic engagement organizations collectively, and we participated in over 100 local redistricting processes. And we found in that report that incumbency protection remains to be the primary obstacle to fair community representation, and that overall independent redistricting commissions that are adopted maps better reflect the interests of communities over incumbents. Given that, we recommend that jurisdictions are prohibited from drawing lines to favor or discriminate against incumbents, And we also recommend that there's a prohibition for the direct appointment of commissioners by elected officials. We offer some other key principles when we're thinking about independent redistricting commissions, and that is that they're transparent and participatory, and that they're the community-centered. Map drawing is a part of the other key principle. We want to thank the Fierce Committee for their diligence over the summer working on this issue, and the entire Elections Commission for taking up this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is Jen. Let's see. Okay,
Hi.
Jen,
Yeah.
you're good to go.
Okay. Hi. This is Jen Say with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. With all this talk about qualifying or disqualifying non-voters and commissions, I would like to remind the and mention to the commission that as of November 2020, with the passing of Prop C, so long as an individual is of legal voting age and a sub-resident, they can serve in any city board, commission, and advisory bodies, even the Elections Commission. Prop C amended the city charter to remove the requirement that individuals serving on city boards, commissions, and advisory bodies must be U.S. citizens and registered voters, while still requiring those individuals to be of legal voting age and San Francisco residents. Thanks to Prop C, there was at least one member of the RDTF that was a non-voter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a caller. 374.
Hi. Yes, hi. This is Lauren Girardin with the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. It's not intentional for me and Jen to be back to back, but here we are. Thank you to the Elections Commission and the Fierce Committee for more than a year of work. I feel like I might need to update that number in my head, but there's so much that you've done and will continue to do in the next few months to look at ways to bring truly independent redistricting to San Francisco. The Fierce Committee has really done a fierce amount of great work. And we just need to emphasize this. Fair elections need fair maps. So to do the work that you're doing requires the city to have a process that can produce fair maps. And that can only happen when our city's map drawing process and the body that does it is independent of the influence of elected officials. People should be determining these maps, not politicians or political power. It's clear from all of these discussions that we need a robust set of redistricting reforms so all San Franciscans can have the fair elections that they deserve. We especially appreciate the reminder that several key redistricting reforms that are being discussed by the Elections Commission were also recommended by the most recent redistricting task force. In their final report, which is available online if anyone wants to check it out, the redistricting task force strongly expressed that certain reforms are needed, and some of those would require changing the city charter. Even if AB 1248 and 764 pass, we must update our charter. As we mentioned in a Fierce meeting, the mapping deadline in our charter is what prevents San Francisco from being able to use the excellent remedies provided in state law per the city attorney's memo. At a minimum, we need to remove the charter mapping deadline so we can use the state mapping deadline and the remedies. We also need to change the charter to remove the trigger that starts redistricting in San Francisco. Even if census data is not delayed again, waiting for the census data means San Francisco will never have enough time for the kind of redistricting process that the city needs and deserves. Thank you so much for all of your work, and we look forward to the further conversation.
Thank you. And there are no other attendees who wish to raise their hand.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Secretary Davis. For the record, I think it's been about 16 months. Just, back the envelope math of working on this. So it's been a Herculean effort, and I'm seeing the light. I'm excited for us, for San Francisco. Okay, that'll close out agenda item number 6. And we'll now move to agenda item number 7, 2023-2024 policies and priorities, discussion and possible action on potential policies, priorities, and focus areas over the coming year for the Elections Commission, Department of Elections, per San Francisco Charter, Section 131035. So before we get into the packet items, I kind of wanted to set the table a little bit about this. Obviously, our mandate as a body is to ensure that we oversee the department and elections and ensure that our elections are free, fair, and functional. But we also are tasked with establishing policy for the department and thinking about those efforts in a broader way. Many times our focus areas have been not necessarily formally established so much as just kind of brought up, come over time. And so what I'm hoping to do is, after the budgeting process is kind of closed and moving into election season, really thinking about more formally and structurally what our priorities and policy areas might be that we continuously pay attention to over the course of the next year. And Vice President Jordanek and I have both established some policies that we'd like to talk about today that are reflective of many of the conversations that we've already been having over the last year, that we continue to talk about. It's just putting it into more of a actual structured policy to look forward for things that we care about as a body and continue to work with the department on. Two of which we've already alluded to around results reporting. I've alluded to voter registration. VP Jordanek will talk a little bit about open source. But the general idea is let's briefly discuss these, get some feedback, see if we can get some consensus on these policies, and then hopefully routinely at our ongoing meetings continue to revisit these policies. So whatever we discuss today doesn't necessarily need to be exact specific. It can be a general agreed upon focus area and policy of the commission that we continue to revisit as the year goes on. So if folks have thoughts about that process, I welcome that as well. But trying to give us a little bit more structure, and we'll try to also routinely agendize these as well. So any questions about that process before we actually delve into the documents that we developed? Okay, I don't see any hands. Okay, I will hand it over to Vice President Jordanek to start with RCV results reporting.
Okay, thank you, President Stone. So I'm just going to give a quick intro to this proposed policy priority. So I'm just going to, so this is a topic that we've discussed a lot over the years, many years back. And one of the more recent times we talked about it was at a BOPEC committee meeting back in August 2022. We talked about how the department can improve its RCV results. And during that meeting, we sort of were brainstorming with both short and long-term solutions. And the short-term solutions were largely implemented for that election that happened after that, which was November 2022. But then the long-term solutions, we never really got around to discussing again. So this proposed policy document sort of captures a lot of the long-term stuff we talked about during that meeting. And I'll just read the first sentence of the document. It says, the results of ranked choice voting contests should be convenient to read and access and should be accessible to all members of the public. And then it has 2 bullet points. The first one is that the final round vote totals should be directly on the department's summary page. And then the second bullet is that the detailed results should be available in multiple languages and should be accessible to people with vision impairments. And as President Stone mentioned, obviously our discussion during agenda item number 5 touched on some of these things, but it does show that this policy goal is at least technically feasible. And so, yeah, that's the first proposed policy.
Thank you. I guess we can run through all the policies first and then open it up for conversation if there is any. I'll talk just very briefly about voter registration, unless you'd like to go straight into talking about yours. Okay. So I included a document on voter registration. I talk about this routinely on this body. But one stat I really wanted to pull out is, according to the Bay Area Equity Atlas, that San Francisco actually has one of the lowest registration rates in the Bay Area. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to explore this, as I have been. I've been talking to the director about this probably, like I said, since I started on the commission. And I did want to call out specifically concern I had around Latinx and AAPI communities whose voting rates, and specifically I'll come back to eligibility, which is a separate data point I want to address, that the turnout is very low in comparison with, okay, I thought she was coming to me. I was like, okay, let me pause, but let me keep going. In comparison with the overall average of the population of San Francisco. And so it's not just perhaps overall at San Francisco that our registration rates are low. And it's also, we need to dive into specifically look at communities, demographic information, specifically around race, ethnicity, income level, language, et cetera. And I want to just make a caveat in saying that this is not necessarily a reflection of the department. I don't want it to come off that way. It is very simply, this is an issue that people face everywhere. It's a little bit different from what you might see in a very bright red state where there are pretty significant and intentional voter suppression measures that are in place to prevent folks from participating. And so I want to be clear that that is not at all what I am implying about what's happening in San Francisco. I see this as an opportunity, and I also see this as an opportunity for us as a body to participate in this process more. So there are a couple of ways in which I think all of these things can address. I mentioned previously that I've already been working with the director on this for a while. He's incredibly collaborative and open to a lot of this. So these policies were actually done in collaboration with him and in discussion with him. I just want to make that very clear. And the goals are very light. The policies are very light. They're not necessarily these restrictive things. I think they're really kind of 3 areas. One is continuing to dive deeper into the issue in the imbalance of voter registration and participation, and collaborate on new and more targeted efforts. So we have seen success from the department's efforts around Go Green. We've been talking about language access. We heard a little bit today about soliciting community feedback. How can we continue to talk about ways and engaging ways to bring communities into the process? The department's done great work in terms of launching grant funding for communities to go off and do that initiative, to talk to their own communities. And that is incredibly important and valuable. And so how do we keep coming up with more ideas leading up to November 24? And the second part of that actually is, maybe should have even come first, should also fuel these ideas, which is data. The department actually has amazing resources around registration rates. They have the e-data. They have a page on their website where you can see, and it's updated daily, registration rates, new registrations by district, And that's congressional and supervisory assembly. I mean, you can really drill down. I mentioned earlier the concerns around voter percent of eligible voters who are actually registered. And that number is actually very difficult to pin down. I've been talking to the director about this. He's been incredibly collaborative. And so we're exploring different ways of how can we actually look at San Francisco and see and get actually a closer look at who is eligible and who is not registered. And that way the department can explore, and we as a body and the city itself can explore how to target outreach efforts in those areas differently. And so I think with that data and continuing to talk about that data, we can get closer to a more targeted approach in addition to all the great work that the department already does. So one way in which I think we can start doing that, not necessarily specifically around eligibility, but just data and having more transparency, is including more about this in the director's report. So actually just having numbers. It doesn't have to be, the director does an incredible job of putting together a very comprehensive director's report, but I don't think it needs to be anything more than literally just numbers of new registrations, maybe perhaps by districts, and ways in which they tried to build up that registration number, such as tactics. One might be, for example, the grant funding or things like that. We may not be able to get those tactics until later, but at least just at our meetings, let's see where we're at in terms of registration. The third piece, and then I'll kind of take a breath, is around how the commission can participate. And again, the director was very, very open to this idea. I'm really excited about this way in which the commission can reach into our own networks and our own communities and bring ideas and resources back to the department. So, new ideas we can talk about here as we agendize this initiative throughout the year. We can continue to bring those ideas with the caveat that the department may not always have the resources to implement those ideas. But I think we've seen as a body that we have a lot of great ideas. So I really encourage us as a group to use this item as something throughout when it's agendized to bring ideas. It doesn't mean every month I'm hoping that you all will come with 10 new ideas. It's just as we go. I think soliciting our input and our resources would be great. So that's it for me on the registration policy. I'll hand it to VP Jordanic to talk about the last one, and then we'll open the floor up for commissioners to share thoughts, feedback, or any additional comments.
Yes, so my second proposed policy is on the topic of open source voting systems. And this also is a topic that has been of interest to the commission for many years and to the rest of the city. I think 2007 was the first year that the commission and the Board of Supervisors first started adopting positions in support of open source voting in some form. And I did attach a history document that I previously circulated a year ago that summarizes a lot of that past activity. So this policy has two parts to it. The first is to follow a city policy that was established back in 2014 by a board resolution that was introduced by Supervisor Scott Wiener, and that passed unanimously. And that was a policy for the department to collaborate with other organizations to develop an open source voting system. And a lot has changed since 2014. And, there's new information to collect. So the way this item is phrased is to get updated information from voting system organizations, to ask them what they would need to develop a system that meets all of our needs. Things like multi-language capability, ranked choice voting support, and is it money they need, or do they need certain information? And if it's money, how much? So this would set us up and give us the ability to work with the board and the mayor to ask them for the resources that would be needed during next year's budget season, if any are needed. And, based on whatever information we hear back. And the second item is, this is a suggestion that actually came up during a commission meeting back in the fall of 2021, when we first started discussing the idea of doing an open source pilot during the November 2022 election. And that idea was to have a demo of an open source voting system in City Hall, but we could have a demo of any organizations that have systems in development. And this would be a lot easier than a pilot because it wouldn't require Secretary of State approval. It doesn't have to be a fully complete system. It can be something that organizations are still working on. It can be held on any day, and it doesn't have to be planned out 9 months in advance, which the pilot had to be done. So so that was the second idea, and it would kind of reiterate to the public, the wider world, that open source still is something that San Francisco is interested in, and it just puts us on record as you know, still wanting to see this move forward, and it could be our way of supporting the movement more generally.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek. I really appreciate your effort and work input developing these. Let's open it up for commission input. Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Thank you both. Commissioner Jordanek, question. Number one.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley, would you mind
I'm
speaking
sorry.
into, it's just
me, I'm
curved,
sorry.
maybe just straighten the mic, that might help.
Question, number one, the first one that you talked about, when we put this all together, this was before you did your brilliant RCV memo that showed that what we could do with the results. Is it possible that, because that's an open source, that could be our demo? Or are you looking to do more than that?
For the demo for the open source or for the?
Yeah, well, all the above, I don't know.
Oh, well, for a demo of open source, you'd want to have, I mean, the idea would be, it would be an end-to-end system where something where voters would actually cast the ballot on the system.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I needed that clarification. I'm not technically astute. But I do think that if we can move forward on your RCV open source voting, that will go a long way toward just creating some trust and exposure for the RCV, for the open source voting infrastructure. So I just want to put that out there as a possibility. The second thing is I just want to jump to President Stone's voter registration. I just want to make a suggestion for a commission participation, and it's obviously would be optional, but you're at this level, is what I want to say. I'm like, a lot of this stuff is like over me. And I just want to say on a very practical level, I would be very interested at the commission maybe picked once a quarter where if we were interested, we could go out and register voters.
I would love that idea.
Yeah. And that we could like pick different places to go where they're underrepresented, because those are data points we could bring back and talk to you about where you are. Some of this stuff when you're talking, it's over me. It just, you've studied this and this is your area of expertise, and you speak a language that I don't necessarily speak all the time. I'll be very candid. But I like to go out and get my hands dirty. I really do. That's how I learn. And so I think that to start, because what I also think is that so many times we as a body or commissions as a body just come up with more work for the department to do. And I think for us to build trust and credibility, we need to do a few things ourselves to help them. And I do think that would be a good starting point if there were and I don't think it's realistic I know it's not for me to do it once a month, but I could definitely do it once a quarter. And if we had a couple of days where we could pick that and coordinate it with the department, I would be very willing to do that. I'm very interested in it. And then I'd love to then come back and share that information at the committee. And then I think I would have a better understanding of what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley. Does anyone else I'll respond after everyone's had a chance to. Yes, Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I just think these are fabulous priorities, and thank you to President Stone and Vice President Jordanic for putting it on paper. And then to Commissioner Hayden Crowley, the League of Women Voters does it every month. So if you're interested in going out and registering people to vote, you can just volunteer with them. They do different neighborhoods. And I think you're right. It's, getting your, your feet wet in the field is really, it helps you understand, because believe me, I've done a lot of voter registration. And as to channel Commissioner LaVolsi, who just had to leave, there are a lot of reasons people don't register, and they're not necessarily obvious to people like us. And so I've heard everything. And I have spent sometimes 45 minutes trying to convince someone to register who's eligible, right? And seems quite intelligent. And they have their reasons.
I know that. I read when my husband ran for supervisor, I walked around with donation envelopes in one pocket and voter registration in the other. And there were close friends of ours that were not registered to vote. But let me tell you one other thing that we did that I thought was, I don't know if you could encourage this with all candidates, but we put a register to vote right on the homepage of his website that I did, so that, I mean, every candidate should do it. Every candidate should have a register to vote button right on their homepage that will take them to. But let me just add one more thing to a most recent experience that I wrote Director Arntz about. I had to renew my driver's license, and I had a real ID, and I was doing it online. So I go in to do it, and it says, it's this automatic thing where they say, are you registered to vote? Well, I'm registered to vote. But then they had like this whole series of questions. And one of the questions was, do you not want to, it was like, you're not going to register to vote. You don't want to register to vote, but it didn't give you the option to say, I don't want to register to vote because I'm already registered to vote. And that was really, like, I kind of freaked out. I wrote him a long email about it saying, okay, am I going to come back and am I not going to be registered? Are you going to take me off the voting rolls? And he wrote me back and said, you're absolutely right. It's not clear. So this is like,
I think there's actually, point of clarification, I actually think there's some state legislation that's being worked on around that right now about that exact question of the opt-in, because it is confusing.
It's very confusing.
Voters.
But anyway, just one more thing on the League of Women Voters. I would rather work with the Department of Elections because my goal is I'm an elections commissioner and I want to build trust and credibility with the Department of Elections. And I want to build those relationships. And not to say that I wouldn't want to do the same thing with the League of Women Voters, but right now this is my commitment. And so I think as a body, we should work to build the relationships with the people that we're serving.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure. Oh, were you raising your hand? Oh, yeah, Commissioner Parker.
Yeah, it feels important for all of us to weigh in on these if we're going to say these are our priorities for the year. I appreciate the work that you both have done to capture these in writing and in these priority documents. We obviously spent some time already talking about the ranked choice voting, and so I think what was really useful about what you presented earlier in your report, Commissioner Jordanic, is like this is technically feasible. You helped show that, and so it feels like a doable thing. And then you're already working in partnership with the director, and so that's really great. Voter registration. I know I think I said I've said this before to folks. I mean, of course, this is the devil's advocate. Is there's lots of things that make people not want to do this, and some of that is faith in local government and stuff. But I also recognize that we can only control what we control, and so that is what. So I appreciate that that's what you have listed in this document is like what can we actually do as a Department of Election, as elections commissioners to help increase rates of participation and registration rather than fall into the abysmal, people don't trust the government, they're never going to register, when we're not the Board of Supervisors or the mayor doing the things, or the President of the United States, right? We can only do what we can do. So I appreciate that takes this tack. And then, yes, I definitely support, I like the ideas that are laid out here for the open source voting systems. They also seem to me to be very practical and to just, and frankly, just to raise some awareness about this with people who might not be, by doing a public demo like that. There might be people who are not thinking about that. We know there are people who come to our meetings all the time talking about this, but the majority of people are not talking about this and may not understand the importance of open source voting for election security and otherwise. And so I think by doing something like a public demo that raises awareness for others to participate and weigh in on this process and support the department as they explore ways to move this forward for us as a city. And I think really critical is that what do the voting system organizations need? What does the department need? What barriers need to be removed for this to move forward? Like that's also very practical. And so I think that both of those examples of what might be done are really good examples that I would encourage in order to make this a reality and doable. Because it would be easy to see all three of these things as like, they're big. But I think the way that you both have approached describing these feel very doable. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Parker. Thank you all. I would love to add, actually, no, Commissioner Bernholz, did you want to weigh in as well, or I didn't? Okay, cool. Just want to make sure I'm being inclusive. Couple things, last things I wanted to add that I obviously already shared this out of turn, but I love that idea, Commissioner Hayden Crowley. I love, love, love it. And I absolutely agree that it should be with the department. The department, as we know from the director's reports, does so many outreach events. Even if we're not just like knocking on doors, we could participate in an outreach event. They do so much. And so even just getting to, participate in that process, I love that idea. And maybe it's not always the same type of thing. Maybe one quarter it's an outreach event, another quarter it's, we can talk about that. So I'll ask the director what he thinks as well in collaboration, but I definitely think it should be with the department. And I'm very excited by this idea. I also think we should explore adding registering to vote on our own website. Obviously, the department has that, but it's a longstanding thing that I've observed that we don't add it to the list of things for the website that need to be updated all the time. I also wanted to echo what Commissioner Parker said about the barriers to remove for the director, that Vice President Jordanek, in your goal around open source, I think is great. What I really like about this policy or the priority specifically about the demo is that, open source has been this long-standing policy of San Francisco and obviously the Elections Commission, but this brings another kind of phase of rejuvenation to get really people kind of back to what Commissioner Hayden Crowley was saying about voter registration, that just showing it practically what it is. I think it just immediately gets excitement. So I think turning it back to you and saying, how do we support this? How do we support the department in doing this? And how do we get the traction from the press as well, so that we can continue to add to that packet of the history of open source through continued efforts with electeds and the public. So I'm really excited about that. That's it from me. I really appreciate the conversation. I want to make sure everyone had a chance to weigh in. Did anyone else have any last comments that they wanted to make before we turn it over to public comment? Oh, and Commissioner Lavolsi, before she had to exit the meeting, also shared how much she loved Commissioner Hayden Crowley's idea. of registered and move the vote. So I wanted to share that on her behalf. Looks like we have unanimous consent. Anyone else before we move to public comment? Yes, Commissioner Dye.
Are we going to vote on these?
That's a great idea that we should definitely do. Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, but can I make one more comment?
Please. No, we make a motion second and then we move to public
Okay.
comment. Yeah, thank you.
I move that we approve these policies.
Thank you. Does anyone want?
Yeah.
Second. Okay, go ahead and
Okay, I just want to make a comment about Commissioner Jordanik's proposal that we find out all this stuff from these voter groups. I'm just going to go back to the fact that if we ask the department to do that, it may not happen, and we might want to take a look at how we might do that ourselves. I know it's work, and we don't, and I don't have the time to do it, but it is something that we should consider working collaboratively with them to do it, because I just find if you're giving, it's an unfunded mandate, and it's not realistic or fair to just expect that a department, I mean, they've got a lot of other things to do. You really kind of have to, it's, what is it called? The rule of pairing. And so if you pair yourself with that, then it gets done. So my suggestion.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley. So before we move to a vote, let's move to public comment.
Okay, we have people with their hand raised. Our first person is a call-in. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
hello. This is David Schmidt. I'm the San Francisco coordinator for the California Clean Money Campaign. We are a government reform group, nonpartisan. We've been advocating for open source voting systems for more than 7 years. And we want to support Commissioner Jordanik's open source voting systems policy priority. We really want to encourage the creation and certification of an open source voting system that meets San Francisco's needs, with a goal of demonstrating and adopting an open source voting system as soon as practical. And we believe it's a great idea to do outreach to voting system organizations to find out what they need to develop an open source voting system. And it's also a great idea to conduct a public demonstration in City Hall before the 2024 general election. That would really help to speed up the process of getting an open source voting system for San Francisco. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another call-in attendee.
Hello, I'm Alec Bash. I am calling from the East Coast, so it's after midnight now, although I live in San Francisco. Worked at the planning department 25 years and the port 5 years, and then I got involved in national politics when I retired. And I've been appearing before the Elections Commission for the past 15 years on open source code issues, and I like to associate myself with everything David Smith just said about the reasons why to support Commissioner Jordanik's priority statement. But without going further into that, I'd just like to say I've also registered thousands of voters in my national political efforts, and one reason why we don't have as high percentages in San Francisco of those who can often be more unlikely to register to vote is we don't have the same national campaigns that groups like the Center for Voter Information, the Voter Participation Center, America Votes, the Working America. These are campaigns that throughout America work within mainly battleground states to get as many people from the new emerging American electorate to register to vote. So I don't think we're going to get them to get involved in San Francisco unless we have a incredibly competitive Democratic primary like we did with the Hillary Bernie efforts. But some ideas would be to, whenever people are going to promote a street fair or festival within San Francisco, let them have a voter registration link on their websites also, and have them do everything they can to encourage voter registration efforts. And I think that would be a perhaps more wholesale way to get more involvement of such organizations, and to even have a performance standard for them of how many people do they think they can get registered to vote at their event. So it isn't just up to the Department of Election staff or the commissioners to go there, but to have that be part of the priority of those who are sponsoring these events. So again, my primary reason for being here is for open source code. I hope you will do what you can to proceed with priorities on that, but just wanted to give you that perspective on voter registration. I've been at many of these events myself, registering voters over the past 20 years since I retired from the city. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
That was the same. Oh, that's the same.
Okay, can you hear me? Is that the same? It's the same.
Thank you. Yeah. There you go.
Caller, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes. And am I still on the call? I made my statement.
Okay, thank you. It was.
Thank you.
I would lower the hand after you
Lower the
did
hand.
that.
Really?
Yeah. Now go to 14. 14. Calling user 14.
I think I think that was
That
Ellen.
was him.
Try Preston Jordan.
You lowered number 13.
Oh, yeah, was it the wrong?
There's Steve Chesson.
Okay, let me try this again.
Plenty.
So actually, will you lower the hand for user 14? Lower the hand for 14, and then go to 13, and then just unmute them. They're right there. They're right above 14.
They're the fourth person.
13's not raised.
Perfect.
Because she lowered it.
She lowered Okay, it. That's correct.
Caller, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Hello, do you have a comment?
Okay, mute. And they can re-raise their hand if they'd like. Okay. There you go. And then go to Jim.
Jim Lindsay.
Yeah. So, hold on, let me just, so if you don't mind scrolling to Jim, the sequence can be unmute and then lower the hand. But for now, let's scroll down.
It is Jim Lindsay.
Yep, exactly. And then going forward, we'll just do unmute and then lower hand.
Mr. Lindsay, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Do you have a comment?
Okay, if you have a comment, we will look to see if you re-raise your hand. And for now, we'll move to the next public commenter. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Mr. Lindsay, do you have a comment? Hello?
We cannot hear you.
Go to the next one.
Let's let me get her. Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. This is.
I got you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's Preston Jordan again, calling from the East Bay. And as you know, or may not know, Alameda County has founded an elections commission, following San Francisco's good example, but 22 years later, motivated by issues here. And so I'm encouraged that the motion is to pursue improving ranked choice voting results reporting, because it seems that what San Francisco does when it leads, it easily has a chance to adopt those good practices. So I encourage the passage of that motion. Something else that comes to mind that has bothered me for quite a long time and is applicable to San Francisco as well is the reporting of plurality at large elections, which I believe is the election method that's used for community college board and the school board. And they are reported in a manner that is the percent of votes, not the percent of voters that support each candidate. And I would submit that the percent of voters that support each candidate is more important than the percent of votes that each candidate receives in these multi-vote and elections. But it turns out with current reporting the way it is, it's impossible to calculate. And that seems to be fundamental information that's missing for the function of democracy. So I know that would be an addition. Since it's just coming up now, since I'm on a deliberative body, I know the likelihood of that getting adopted is very low, and I wouldn't necessarily encourage it without more thought, but I want to take the opportunity to put that on the table. I'll just close again, reiterating that I hope you pass the motion to improve ranked choice voting as a policy goal for the body for the year. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your work.
Okay, thank you.
You might want to mute him. You might want to mute him. Mute him. Yes, there you go.
Mr. Chesson? Hi, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. Thank you. Again, my name is Steve Chesson. This is somewhat of a repeat of the testimony I gave under item 5. As I said then, I'm a member of the Santa Clara County Citizens Advisory Commission on Elections, known as CASE, but I'm not speaking on behalf of CASE tonight, although my testimony is informed by my participation on CASE. I'm speaking in support of the proposed policy on ranked choice voting results reporting. Santa Clara County uses the same Dominion equipment that San Francisco uses. And while no jurisdiction in Santa Clara County currently uses ranked choice voting, and the county has yet to obtain the ranked choice voting module from Dominion, both the county and jurisdictions within the county are considering changing their elections to use ranked choice voting. I hope you adopt this proposal because if San Francisco implements it and implements it implements it using open source, then our county, Santa Clara County, if and when it implements ranked choice voting, would be able to use it as well, benefiting everybody who uses ranked choice voting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let's try Mr. Lindsay again. Mr. Lindsay, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I sure can. You're ready to go.
Oh, no, it appears he's back on mute for some reason. It wasn't you. There you go.
Okay, you ready to go?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I sure can.
Well, all right. So, hi, I'm on the Alameda County Elections Commission, and I'm also the person who wrote the program that Cambridge uses to count its ranked choice elections. I'm the co-founder of the California Ranked Choice Voting Institute, and I'm also a member of my city's Racial Inclusivity and Social Equity Commission. So a lot of what you said is near and dear to my heart. The multilingual aspect of RCV reporting is really critical. I'm very excited to see what Commissioner Janonik has put together, and the vision impaired capabilities are extremely critical. Alameda County was sued, and that could happen to any county that does not meet the certain requirements, including San Francisco. So you're actually in danger of that unless you implement something like this. Showing the summary, showing the final round is utterly critical. The first round doesn't mean that much. People win about 85% of the time when they have the first, when they're ahead in the first round, but they don't win 100% of the time. And it causes great confusion when that doesn't happen and it's presented like it is. So that's super critical. The other thing is that this could be really helpful in Alameda County. We have the vision impairment problem that's really an issue, and just really bad reports that causes immense confusion. I could see this spreading across California. There's now 4 counties that need RCV support, and it's going to be a lot more as time goes by. And then you've got 2 entire states, and a very large number of counties and cities that need something like this. So I hope you do it. And if you do, it's going to be, I believe it will really spread. It will become just a common best practice. First done by San Francisco, of course, big shock. But I really do hope you do it. Just real quick on the voter registration stuff, which is also near and dear to my heart. One thing that seems to work best is going through trusted community groups. Maybe you're already doing that. But when it's just the department or just the league, I love the league, but you know, that's not your priest. That's not your community group leader. That's not, you know, try that approach. And I think it doesn't solve the problem, but I think more people will register than you're getting if you're not doing that approach. Other than that, you guys are doing great work. I'm excited about the Alameda County Commission once it finally gets started. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you for your comment.
You just, there you go.
Okay, there are no other attendees wanting to make a comment.
Thank you so much, Secretary Davis. And thank you, public commenters, for that feedback. Let's move to a vote. And do you want me to repeat? I'll repeat the motion if that's helpful. Okay, the motion is to adopt the the proposed policies and priorities for 2023, 2024.
President Stone.
Yes.
President Jordan.
Yes.
Commissioner Burgos.
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd.
Aye.
Commissioner Higgins.
Yes.
Commissioner Parker.
Yes.
Okay. This does pass.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Secretary Davis. Thank you so much, Vice President Jordanek. Thanks so much for the commission and public commenters. I'm really excited about this. That closes out agenda item number 8. Let's move to agenda item number, sorry, that was agenda item number 7. Let's move to agenda item number 8, agenda items for future meetings. Discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas. Talked about a few today. If there's anything that hasn't already been mentioned, please share that now. Otherwise, oh, sorry. Yep. VP Jordanek.
Yes, so I have 2 things to mention. Number 1, the annual report from last year, I still haven't forgotten about it. My plan is to have a draft for the commission to review at next month's meeting. And then I also want to just let people know, Commissioner Hayden Crowley and Commissioner Levolsi, who's not here. I haven't forgotten about BOPEC. I'd like to schedule a BOPEC meeting whenever the 2 of you are available. So I'll be reaching out to you, you know, in the next few days, so we can find a time that works. And that's all.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek. Anyone else?
Yes. President Stone, when we are talking about doing voter registration event and or other community outreach event, maybe at the next meeting, we could have it might be something as simple as looking at his community calendar. But we should, I wasn't thinking that we would all go as a commission, that we would go when we could. And obviously it's not mandatory. It's really an optional thing, but it is something I'd be interested in doing once a quarter. So I don't know if we could put the calendar of events, if we should put that on the agenda to discuss that, just making that available.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley. Absolutely. It makes sense. I also think we probably would have to be kind of careful about how we did it as a whole body, because that would technically be a meeting. Even if it is available to the public, we'd have to create an agenda, there would have to be notice, the whole thing. So yep, I echo that, and it's an important point to make. And the outreach calendar is so great. So yeah, absolutely. Let's make sure we have that. And perhaps even the director might shed some light on outreach events that would be most appropriate for folks to join because we want to be considerate of our role as commissioners. Anyone else? Okay, let's move to public comment on agenda item number 8, agenda items for future meetings.
There are no hands raised.
Great. One other item I just wanted to mention before I close that out is for redistricting, because we are not going to be, because of everything we've discussed about it today, and how much we have to achieve, I'm going to suggest that perhaps we don't agendize it separately for the next meeting, and perhaps if there are updates, you can just share it in commissioners' reports, since obviously there'll be a lot coming down the line. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, that is it. 9:30 p.m. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you. Would you be willing to help Marissa and me bring the